Hello and welcome back to my channel What If Deku 2.0. Join us as we delve into the realms of fanfiction and fantasy, bringing you the best stories and discussions. Today we're kicking off part 1 of our series, What If Deku Becomes Host to a Mysterious Entity. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like and subscribe for more content in the future. The author of this story is Unanimasuki from Archive of Our Own. All the relevant links are in the description. Feel free to say hello to the author on their profile. Now let's dive into the fanfic. His frail arms pushed him to his feet, heart pounding so hard he thought his skull might crack. His legs burned with the effort, his lungs on the verge of rupturing. "Kaken, I'm here," he yelled. Fingers scratched and peeled at the black sludge, but it clung stubbornly to Bakugo, tightening its grip around his neck. Izuku's nails tore from their bases, blood smearing across the oily surface as he desperately tried to pull the sludge away. "What am I thinking? I'm going to die. Get out of here, dumbass," the blonde rebel spoke. The black tendrils wrapped around his mouth and body, tightening around his neck. Izuku cried at the desperation in his classmate's eyes. None of his efforts worked, his nails were slipping from their base and blood dripped down his hands. The villain grew tired of his efforts that it started grabbing onto Izuku. A black tendril wrapped around his wrists and slowly crushed them. With his arms restrained, Izuku used up his remaining strength to pull the black sludge away from Bakugo and onto himself. "Damn, nerd. You're gonna get us both killed." Bakugo's freed hand started showing sparks, and before Izuku or the villain could react, a loud blast shook the entire alley. The explosion tore through the alley with a deafening roar. Izuku was flung backward like a rag doll, his back slamming into the brick wall with bone-jarring force. For a moment, everything went black. It was more than what his preteen body could handle. The world blurred at the edges as Izuku tried to push himself up, his body betraying him with every breath. Darkness closed in, and before he could resist, it swallowed him whole. The moon shone down over the ocean and sand. The friend trio ran across the sand as they laughed and chased each other. They had been running around lighting fireworks at each other unsupervised. "Shit, I'm out," one of them said. The others turned towards him with mischievous grins as they all aimed their fireworks at their unarmed friend. He sprinted towards the water, sparks and flames whizzing past his shoulders, singeing the air around him. He sprinted so fast that laughter died in his throat. He plunged into the ocean before the fire reached him. The others grunted in annoyance. "Stop being a coward and face us," one cheered and tossed a box of rockets on the sand. It was far enough that the water couldn't reach it, but still too far that he knew if he reached out to it his friends would show no mercy. "I ain't falling for that cheap tear dash." Before he could finish, the sand suddenly gave way beneath him, pulling him down with a force that felt like 1,000 icy hands. Water surged over him, and tendrils, tight as steel cables, wrapped around his limbs, squeezing the breath from his lungs. He flexed his legs and prepared to jump out with his quirk, but the tendrils kept pulling. His struggle was put to rest when a few tendrils penetrated his thighs. The tendrils tightened, pulling him down with relentless force. Water filled his mouth and lungs, but with a desperate surge of strength, he broke the surface, gasping for air. "Help me," he cried, his voice barely more than a croak. His friends stared from the shore in terror. "Nice try. You can't pull this shit just because you're a coward." The water stood still for moments before the third friend walked out of the water, seemingly not bothered by what had happened. His eyes were a deep black and he barred his fangs out. "PFF, you think you can scare us with that lame act? Seriously, put those fangs away, they're disgusting. No wonder you can't get a date." The other two friends burst into laughter. The pitch-black eyes bore into his own. As he stepped closer, his movements were stiff, almost mechanical, as if something was forcing his body to obey. The laughter died in their throats as the silence of the night pressed in, heavy and suffocating. The left arm flew up and aimed at his friends. His friends just stared dumbfounded at him. "The hell is wrong with you? Don't tell me your feelings are hurt. Maybe we should call it a night, man. You two just soured the vibe." The third friend spoke up. "Pass me the box of sparkles, I'll light it up." When his friend attempted to get the nearby box of sparkles, he was interrupted by the bare foot of his friend over his hand. "Piss off," he snarled. Instead, the foot pressed down harder and stiff. Hey, that hurts. Stop that, you idiot." Crunch after snap, his hand was losing its shape. The pain was unbearable, his screams choked by terror. Instinctively, he stabbed the ground with his free arm and the sand began to vibrate. His idea to cause his friend to sink failed. The tendril pierced his skull with a sickening squelch, and for a moment, his eyes widened in shock, his mouth gaping in a silent scream. Then, as if a switch had been flipped, his body went limp, and the life drained from his eyes. What the hell is wrong with you? The last friend collapsed on the sand, trembling in fear. Then his friend turned stiffly towards him as the tendril returned to him. Stay back! He joined his palms together and shouted, Verdant flame! The green flame roared out of his palms, lighting up the night with a fierce, emerald glow. He poured everything he had into the attack, but as the flames died down, tendrils lashed out, smothering his final hope of survival. Finally, a black palm covered his friend's mouth as he tried to shoot out another attack. The tendrils forced their way into his mouth, muffling his screams. His body convulsed violently as they slithered inside, twisting his insides, and stretching his skin until it nearly tore apart. Then in an instant it was over, his body crumpled, hollow and lifeless. With the carnage behind him, the hollow-eyed figure turned towards the distant city lights, a predator's gaze locked on his next prey. Cold water rained over his face, jolting him awake. His head throbbed with dull pain and his limbs felt like lead. The bright sun stabbed his eyes and for a moment he could only blink against the burning light. Izuku jumped up on his feet but almost fell over again before an arm caught his. The following voice was calm, almost reassuring. Whoa there, kid. Be careful, said a man behind him. He sounded to be around his late 20s. When Izuku turned around, he faced a man dressed in a light blue and white uniform. A large fish-like fin on his head and a blue visor connected to it. Izuku's head lit up at the man. He was a pro-hero that, although Izuku wasn't a big fan of, still was high up on the hero list. You are Manuel, he said in a squeaking voice. Manuel looked back at him with a tired smile. Settle down, kid. I'll do autographs later, but right now I need you to help me out. I heard a loud explosion around here and came as fast as I could. Manuel pointed at the walls and floor. They're clear evidence of a blast here, but you're the only one here. Want to explain yourself? Izuku's heart raced as he took a step back, nearly tripping over his own feet. Wait, no, you've got it all wrong, he blurted out, his hands waving frantically in the air. I'm quirkless, just a useless nobody. It was my classmate. He was attacked by this giant sludge monster. His voice cracked with desperation, his mind spinning as he tried to piece together the fragments of his memory. Manuel's eyes softened but hardened again. What you did was very dangerous and stupid. What do you think could have happened if things went wrong? Where's your friend? And what about that monster you mentioned? Manuel's black eyes stared intently, waiting for a response. Thinking back, Izuku couldn't remember anything after passing out. Kaken was in trouble and he rushed in without thinking. The sludge monster had them both in its grasp before Kaken used his quirk to fight it off. The explosion had hurt him so much that his mind was still fogged up. He looked downcast, avoiding Manuel's gaze. I don't know, I'm sorry. With his gaze still down, all he heard was a heavy sigh. Most likely a disappointing one. It was a silent reminder of how out of depth he truly was. After a few more questions, Izuku was allowed to go. It wasn't clear if he had been any help to Manuel. The chances were low since Manuel had refused to answer any of his questions and left without signing his journal. What was I thinking? Being a quirkless hero? I'm not fooling anyone but myself. He looked at his phone and saw that the screen was almost completely shattered. He couldn't tell how long he was out there for. He assumed that the store was closing soon and he needed to get the stuff his mom had asked for. Ouch. His body strained at the slightest movement, especially his hands. When he looked at them he saw that his nails were back in place and, although the blood still stained his hands and arms, the pain was minimal in that part of his body. He ran to the store, his body screaming in agony with every movement. Turning the doorknob, he entered his home with a downcast expression on his face and empty hands. His strain had made him late and the store closed early. Izuku, baby, there you are. Where's is the food? The honey-like voice soothed him, which made what he had to say hurt more. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't make it to the store in time. He gave her a tight hug, the warmth of her embrace almost making the knot in his chest loosen, before heading toward his room. Inko's eyes widened with worry as she noticed the slight limp in his step, and the faint bruise on his cheek. Izuku, did something happen? You look hurt, sweetheart. Was it those bullies again? Her voice took on a firmer edge. I'll get my skillet ready if they laid a hand on you. He held on to his mom. No more, nothing happened. I'm sorry for worrying you and I'm sorry about the food. I think I'll head to bed now. But it's still early, Izuku. Your favorite hero show is about to start and since I came home early I thought we could watch it together. Don't be a jerk, she's your mom. Thank you, Mom, but I'm just too tired today. I love you, good night. I love you too, honey. I'm here if you need anything. Before he could get to his room, she pulled him close and kissed his cheek. She knew it was embarrassing to him, but as his mom, it didn't matter. He shut the door behind him and took off his shirt for another one that said, sleeping shirt. His eyes lingered on the cracked screen for a moment longer, his heart heavy. He couldn't let her see it, not after everything she already did for him. He'd figure something out somehow. A son with a quirk could help her more than I ever could. He sank into the all-might mattress and his eyelids heavy as sleep began to take him. But even as sleep claimed him, a dark presence stirred in the corners of his mind and body, its whispers curling through his thoughts like a shadow, cold and relentless. Nights ago, at a time before the friend trio perished at the seashore, a massacre unfolded at a bustling food market at night. The food stand stood wrapped in police tape, the flickering lights of police cars reflecting off the blood-stained street lights. Officers moved around carefully at the scene. The forensic photographer's finger trembled. Bodies scattered everywhere, some impaled on the street lights like Christmas lights and others dismembered like puzzles. The stench was too much to bear for most officers. All but 2 officers stayed behind. The first officer, a tall man with sharp features, Tamakawa, flicked his whiskers nervously as he surveyed the carnage. Beside him, his partner Tsukachi, a seasoned detective with a furrowed brow, carefully analyzed the scene. Ever seen shit like this, Tsukachi? The first officer asked his partner. Never in my life on duty, he responded, his voice tight with disgust. What kind of villain would do this? The officer asked, his whiskers twitching. This is beyond villain behavior, Tsukachi muttered, his voice tight with disgust. Whoever did this, they're a monster. The atmosphere grew thicker. Officer Tsukachi's eyes narrowed as he crouched down on one of the victims. Carefully, he reached his finger out and touched an oily residue clinging to the bodies. His feline partner jumped at this and grabbed his partner's arm. We need to let the investigators get samples first. Tsukachi stood back up and rubbed it in his thumb and index together. Tamakawa paid close attention to what his partner showed him. Between his fingers was a sticky, blood-red residue with black streaks over it. Could it be a blood quirk? Asked Tamakawa. This isn't just blood, he murmured, a chill running down his spine. Wide-eyed, his partner took the sample and placed it in a Ziploc bag. I'll look through any records we have of quirks like this, but I'll have to get back to you. But for now, all we can do is get the coroner to take these bodies away and alert their families if possible. I'll also have to get in contact with some heroes. If this isn't who I think this is, then we could be walking into some serious shit. While the city reeled from the carnage of the night before, a boy named Izuku Midoriya woke up to what he thought was just another day. The young boy's eyelids opened slowly, doing his best to avoid the sunlight. Izuku sat up slowly, a heavy feeling in his chest, a coldness he couldn't quite shake off. But he had woken up later than usual already and had errands to run, so he didn't dwell on it. In and out his hand moved on the grip strength tool that he had gotten as a gift. When he first got it, he had been inspired to use it and become stronger, thinking that it would get him his quirk. Wishful thinking. Now it was just a habit he couldn't stop. While brushing his teeth, he noticed the dark shadows under his eyes. Confused, he also noticed his messy green hair. After a couple of swipes with his comb, he was ready to go. He nearly tripped when running to the front door. While putting his shoes on, his nose twitched towards a pleasant smell. On the kitchen counter, a homemade meal awaited him, eggs and bacon, still warm, with some takoyaki on the side, his favorite. He lunged into it with his hands and started ravaging the eggs and bacon, but completely ignored the takoyaki and the utensils that lay beside it. When he was done, he almost missed the envelope that was under the plate. What's this? The paper ripped open and he opened the letter. It read, Dear Izuku, I'll be working late today, so I won't be home in time to see you. You seemed upset yesterday, but I know the last thing you want is your mother bothering you, but just know I'm here if you need me. I left you your favorite breakfast and snacks, but don't eat them too fast, you'll get a stomach ache. Love, Mom. P.S. Don't stay up waiting for me, you have school tomorrow. Izuku smiled through his tears, carefully folding the letter and slipping it into his pocket. He wanted to call her to tell her how much her words meant, but his phone's cracked screen reminded him that he couldn't. With a sigh, he slipped on his shoes, the pleasant smell of breakfast still lingering in the air as he headed out the door. His legs were still sore from yesterday, but they had recovered much quicker than usual. Whenever Kakin and his pals ganged up on him, he was cursed to week-long pains. It was odd that he still hadn't heard from his classmate after what happened yesterday. His mom would have called his mom about it. But Mom's letter didn't mention it. Kakin must not have told anyone. He's the type of guy to act like nothing happened. The doors to the store closed behind him. Izuku made sure everything he needed was there before he left. The errand had taken him only 45 minutes. Quicker than I thought. He rubbed his ears and ears constantly, a heavy discomfort building on them. Bing. His head turned so fast that he was surprised he didn't get a headache. His ears picked up sounds of arguing from an alley a few blocks back. Sounded like a girl. The young lady shrunk down, holding her bags before her. And, no please. Stay back, do you know who my father is? Oh please just let us get a quick feel, will you? I'll make it worth your time. The drunken man waved his hand around arousingly. His two other friends stepped closer to her. Everything was happening so fast. Her parents had allowed her to shop in an unfamiliar part of town for the first time, and now she was about to get hurt by these grown men. Fight back. You are the heiress to the Yaoyorozu. How can you prove to your parents that you can be a pro-hero if you freeze up now? Her quirk wouldn't listen to her. Miniature dolls fell out of her legs and arms in a frenzy. All of the training her parents paid for was for nothing, and after this, they would surely close any door that leads to her becoming a hero. If she was found after this. With her back against the cold, stone wall, the last of the dolls broke on the ground. The first guy approached again with his arm out, desiring to let loose. His fingers grazed her shirt. BF. Don't touch her. The stern voice came from the other end of the alley. A short boy stood there with grocery bags in his skinny arms. The sun reflected off of his bushy green hair. I mean please leave her alone, he said, his volume decreasing by the word. The initial confidence had vanished and his true persona came out. The two other men closest to him approached him, puffing up their chests for intimidation. The boy shrunk in response but looked at her eyes for a second. He bought her enough time to regain her composure, and in return she would use it to think of a plan. Get lost, brat, this chick's reserved for real men, not wannabe heroes like you, the first man said, causing his two friends to chuckle. The boy shut his eyes, balled up his hands into fists and held them up to his chest defensively. It didn't take an experienced fighter to know that this boy was in over his head. Regardless, his careless approach had practically saved her. You're not scaring anyone with those twig AR, the hell? Get off me. The boy rushed the closest guy and tried pushing him, but he was just too small to make any distance. The others just laughed. The thug grabbed the boy by the collar and hurled him to the wall, causing the boy's face to gash. Momo's breath caught as she witnessed the impossible unfold before her. The man looming over her moments ago was now slumped against the wall, shortly followed by his two companions, their faces twisted in pain. Then she looked towards the boy, who was just as confused as her. No, rather, he was amazed. Quickly, he grabbed her hand and lifted her to her feet, his eyes wide with urgency. She took his hand in hers and yelped as he pulled her out and away from the alley, not without looking back at the three assailants. Instead, she looked forward towards the boy with the bleeding face as they kept running. As they ran, Momo's heart pounded in her chest, but the initial fear gripping her heart had dissipated. This boy, this scrawny stranger, had risked everything to help her, knowing he stood no chance. She felt like she could breathe again. She squeezed his hand tighter, silently thanking him for pulling her back from the edge. The sounds of the men stirring back up behind them jolted Momo back to reality. I'm sorry, but we need to go now, the boy urged, his voice sharp with panic. She didn't hesitate to nod and she matched his pace. How did I do that? It was all too fast. I didn't think of what to do if I saved her. Several blocks away from the alley in a quieter part of town, Izuku thought to rest up and allow the guy to rest also. He leaned against the wall, catching his breath. She did the same. This was when he was able to get a good look at her. Her black hair had fallen loose after running for so long. She rested her fair hand on her disheveled ribbon. The bags she had been holding were withered and near collapsing. I don't know how to thank you, she broke the silence, her voice relaxed. You saved my life. She's beautiful. He realized it was his turn to speak. No words, meaning this. I'm just glad you're okay, he managed to reply. Damn it. He cursed himself internally. She was about to speak when his eyes caught something. Oh no, your bags are about to rip, he blurted out, rushing to help. Here, you can use mine. He offered his bags with a smile, trying to hide the nervous flutter in his chest. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets, the contents she took from her bags. I recognize these brands from celebrities or the hero Uwabami. Just who did I save? Am I under the Mafia's radar now? He went rigid. Who did I just save? Am I on the Mafia's radar now? His mind raced as he scanned the area, eyes darting everywhere. He could be watched right now. Did the thugs know who she was? If this was planned, someone might still be monitoring them. Mutter mutter mutter. Excuse me, her warm hand lifted his face. A girl is touching me? Your face was bleeding when that thug tossed you, she said softly, concern lacing her words. Allow me to take a look, it's the least I can after everything you've done for me. His face was now at her mercy as her hands moved his hair around, a cleaning wipe and alcohol bottle appeared from her hands. He was too immersed in her actions to react. Oh, it seems to have already healed. Thank you. But what about you, did they do anything to you? He asked, his voice showing care. She tilted her head with a smile. I am well now thanks to you. I apologize for not introducing myself earlier, she straightened up. My name is Momo Yaoyorozu. Midoriya wait and no, he looked away from her. Izuku Midoriya? His hand stood up robotically, which she shook. I would like to repay you for what you did for me. Please name your price, Momo said, pulling her purse out and flipping through the bills. You don't have to do that, please. Izuku stammered, his eyes wide as she began flipping through bills. The sound of crisp paper flicking was unbearingly enticing, but alas, he shook his head. That's not why a hero saves people. He reminded himself, trying to push aside the temptation. The girl, Momo, he made sure to remember her name, paused, then smiled warmly. I insist, if not money, then allow me to repay you in another way. Momo's eyes softened as she noticed the frayed edges of his shirt. Your clothes seem to have been damaged in the fight. Let me replace them after we share a cup of tea? I'd love to hear more about the boy who saved me today. He whispered. What? He waited for her to repeat herself in case he misheard. But she wore a confident face. His nervous wreck he called a personality planned for everything hero-wise. Journals upon journals with information on them, but this? Sharing tea with a girl his age? He didn't even know if he liked tea, but her proposition had him changing his taste on the spot. Really? Do you mean that? With me? Now it was her turn to be surprised. Of course. But if you reject, then I have no choice but to understand. Oh no, yes. Yes, I would like to have tea, but... His voice trailed off, uncertainty creeping in. Izuku's next words could either make or break his chances of having a friend. It'll be late soon, and after today maybe you should head home. But we can have tea some other time. This was it, she would give him the same dejected look that he was familiar with. The one where the girl feels insulted that he would put her aside for later. Her smile never wavered. You're right, it's been quite a day. Let's plan for another time when we can both relax and enjoy it. She dialed in her phone with ease, and Izuku marveled at how she took his answer. Have someone to pick her up? How stacked is her family? Momo's tender smile captured him again. Let's exchange phone numbers. I can schedule our meetup location and time, she said, her phone held out to him. Sir Dash, he stopped his phone from coming out completely. Momo had glanced at it for a second, so he instantly put it away. Wait, my phone is completely busted. Just a sec. Quickly, he tore a piece of his convenience store receipt and wrote down his house computer's number. Here, he exclaimed, handing out the crumpled paper and gently taking her neat note, hoping she would accept the old-finished way. He offered to wait with her while she waited to be picked up, but she requested against it, saying that her ride was around the corner. The sun hung low in the sky as they parted ways. Momo flashed through his mind. Stop that. His face went beet red. His shoulders shook in disbelief. On his way home, Izuku couldn't stop replaying the conversation in his mind. With a girl. With Momo. He muttered to himself, his cheeks burning up. What did I agree to? His legs gave out and he stumbled onto the sidewalk. As he stumbled home, his mind still in replay mode, his heart raced with excitement, or rather, from something strange. A cold feeling crept up his spine. He should have focused on the more important matter, how he managed to fend off those thugs. The thugs' faces flashed in his mind, causing him to wrinkle his brow. How could he have pushed them off, all three of them in fact? He had been eating the healthy food his mom cooked for him, using the dumbbells Kaken's mom gave him, but even then, the size difference was too much. And they probably had quirks too. The bathroom lights switched on and he inspected his face in the mirror, his breath fogging up the glass. Momo had cleaned up the blood, but just like she said, there's no cut. His face was unbroken, as if nothing happened at all. Goosebumps everywhere. As he tried to piece together what happened, a sudden voice, deep and unfamiliar, cut through his thoughts like a blade. His reflection in the mirror twisted and distorted. The familiar features of his face melted away, replaced by a deep, dark monstrosity. Its teeth, sharp and pointed, formed an unsettling smile. The white eyes stretched back, hollow and menacing, as they stared into his soul. Izuku Midoriya, a foreign entity, spoke. He jumped back, his head smacking the wall. His arms trembled as he stood back up. He wanted to blame his imagination for this, but the uneasiness flared up as the reflection did not change. We have achieved symbiosis, a voice, deep and rough, echoed within him. The voice purred, dripping with dark amusement. This is a dream. It's a nightmare. We have achieved symbiosis, said the dark voice. Izuku repeatedly smacked his head to force out what was hidden inside. This can't be real. It must have been the trauma from the attack, or one of the thugs used their quirk on me. It must have been something to make me lose it. Stop moving. As his hand struck his skull, a sudden jolt of paralysis shot through him. His heart pounded against his ribs and cold sweat slicked his palms. It was as if invisible chains bound him, locking him in place as a prisoner in his own body. His hands swung down to his sides and his feet moved independently. The feeling of not having control was terrifying. Whoever you are, please don't hurt me, Izuku begged, struggling to move. Calm down. I am on your side. We are a team. It spoke again with persistency. What? Who are you? I am Venom and you are my new host. Consider yourself lucky, many would kill for my power. I didn't ask for this. You must be mistaken. I thought so too. That blonde kid with the explosives seemed like a good pick. Explosives? Why, you're the villain from the alley. Izuku practically screeched that last part, his consciousness almost leaving him. I would use the word, survivor. Now I will let you move and you will not panic or scream like a baby, he said, his deep voice changing into a more determined tone. Izuku could only slightly nod, too terrified to act but also too terrified to pass out. He was being held hostage by the same villain that almost took out his friend. His shoulders slumped, indicating that the paralysis had stopped. He opened and closed his hands, testing his body. Now you will listen to me closely. I have chosen you as my host. From now on, I will use you to survive. Please don't eat me. Don't be stupid. If you die, I die. Mutualism between the two of us. I don't intend to hurt you, kid. But, like it or not, we're stuck with each other. So, you're not going to hurt us. Izuku tilted his head with curiosity. Oh, your mom made good food. The breakfast from earlier today came to mind, with the realization that he ravaged the bacon and barely touched the other stuff. Now that he thought about it, he looked at the time and saw that it was getting late, close to the time his mom said she would get back. He prepared himself for bed and locked himself in his room. So, what are you exactly, Venom? He asked, sitting at the edge of his bed. I am a symbiote who was in search of a host. And you said you found me? You were trying to get Kakin first? Is that what you call the annoying thing? You're right, but he was not the one. I merely needed him for the time while I searched for the perfect host. You saved him by coming to me instead. What would have happened to Kakin if you didn't find a host in time? He dreaded the answer more than anything. He would have been used until I wrung him dry. Venom said without a hint of remorse. Izuku yelled in fear at the revelation. Venom essentially told him that he had saved his friend from an inevitable death. You did indeed save him for now. The people here have some crazy shit that I've never seen. You call them quirks, I can recognize who has one from they were my host. But you don't have one. You truly are a loser. His head down, Izuku thought back to his entire life until now. From the bullying to the verbal harassment he received from his classmates. Now this symbiote has taken over his mind and is going to do who knows what to him. Stop brooding. I am the answer to your prayers, kid. How do you think he managed to stop those thugs? Wait, what? The boy stood up, blood rushing to his head causing him to lay back down. It was you? You stopped them? Of course I did, and you can too. Remember those who pushed you around? With me you are no longer a quirkless loser, we can become stronger than any of them. I can be a hero too? Izuku clasped his hand into a fist as his eyes shined with excitement. The dim fire in his soul ignited into a flame of ambition and hope. How do I do that? First I hunt for food, Venom said. A sharp, sizzling pain shot through his arms once more as his hands started shaking violently. The veins underneath his skin darkened into a coal-black color, they twisted and turned amongst each other. The sensation caused him to gasp, stumbling back due to the molten metal sensation. He rushed out of his room and towards the bathroom door, accidentally tearing off the handle in the process. Luckily his mom wasn't home yet. The reflection in the mirror was of him, but his face was covered in dark lines that shifted around. Oh, I'll stop. Izuku exclaimed. What are you doing to me? He asked desperately. This will be harder than I thought, your body is too frail to handle all of me. I barely touched you, not even 1%. Venom murmured. An exhausted Izuku held his chest as it tightened. It felt like his entire body was being torn apart and burned limb from limb. Is this what having a quirk feels like? No wonder everyone is so much better than me. Izuku stared at the mirror, the black lines in his face receding as well as the ones in his hands. He checked under his shirt and saw that everything went back to normal, besides the cold shivering feeling inside him. I need to sleep, maybe this will all blow over tomorrow. What will I say to Momo? He whispered to himself as his hands hugged his pillows, trying to find some calm in the storm that had literally entered his life. Yes, sleep. We had a long journey ahead of us, Venom's voice purred, almost soothingly. Rest, I will take care of the rest. Exhausted and drained from the day, Izuku barely resisted the pull that sleep had on him. He pulled up his all-might blanket to his chin. But as the consequences slipped away, Venom stirred within. A dark smile curled in the recesses of their shared mind. The moment Izuku's breathing changed to that of deep sleep, Venom took over. A black oily substance crept out of all of his pores, covering up the sleeping boy in a black suit. The symbiote had completely covered its host. He stood tall and muscular, his white, sharp teeth glowing from the moonlight. The roof of the building crumbled as the giant mass landed on it. His giant shadow covered the street. Venom leaped onto the street and crushed the ground, leaving his footprints on the concrete. Venom walked around casually over the small neighborhood. His senses were heightened, every noise, every scent sharper than before. If he were to focus enough, he would be able to hear every heartbeat. With the time he spent with Izuku, he knew he would be against Venom's ways, so he decided to play the slow game, to slowly turn Izuku over to his side with his influence. How so? By doing what any hero would do, getting rid of villains. Venom's predatory instincts took over. The scent of fear, sweat, and blood drew him like a moth to a flame. He had found his first prey, a group of thugs huddled in an alley, their cruel laughter echoing through the alley as they divided up their stolen goods. Venom approached silently. 4 thugs, he could smell their quirk factor emitting from them. Regardless, they would be no match against him. Stationed at the top of the alley, Venom watched, his hunger growing. Without warning, he lunged forward, teeth bared. The men barely had time to scream before Venom shut them up. In a blur of black and white, he took them down one by one. The last thug, who wore triangular sunglasses and a dark orange shirt, attempted to crawl back as far as possible. He trembled in fear and terror, his eyes wide as Venom lifted his comrades and devoured their heads. What are you? He stammered, his voice cracking. Venom grinned, his teeth stained with a dark red tint. He slowly made his way to the last thug. Help. Someone, anyone. I need a he dash. Before he could finish, Venom had closed their distance and lifted him, covering the thug's mouth with his finger. Your comrades are examples of what I'll do to anyone who preys on the innocent. All will lay headless as the vultures feast on your remains. You hear me? Before Venom could continue, a harsh stench reached his nose. He looked down and that the thug had soiled himself from the fear. You just ruined your chances of getting out of here. You asked what I was. Venom's face expanded, his extra teeth showing. His jaw was large enough to head entire bodies if he wanted to. The thug struggled and cried before meeting his fate. I am Venom. With a swift motion, Venom silenced his cries, satisfying his hunger. He walked out of the alley and back into the empty, silent streets. The only sound was the soft sound of blood dripping out the street and down the sewage drain. Satisfied, Venom returned to Izuku's home, his form shifting back into the boy's regular body. The symbiote worked till exhaustion, which was new to it. Usually he could go on fighting for prolonged periods, but with a host as young and weak as Izuku, he could only do so much. Venom worked tirelessly, healing the damage caused by tonight's exertion. Bones mended, bruises faded, and by the time Venom allowed Izuku to take the wheel, the body was once more. His all-might alarm clock blared, pulling Izuku up from his deep sleep, but groaned as he attempted to move. Everything ached as if he'd been hit by a bus. What? Why am I sore? He asked himself, wincing as he moved to dress himself. He glanced at his hands, expecting the black veins to return, and flexed them experimentally. Nothing felt broken, but the pain was undeniable. As he put on his shorts, he made sure to check his legs for any abnormalities but found nothing. Good morning, Venom's voice echoed in his mind. Sleep well? Izuku's eyes widened, memories of last night flooding back. A dejected sigh. You're still here? Of course I am. Venom responded with a hint of offense in his voice. Izuku just shrugged his shoulders. From the corner of his eye, he noticed a towel covering something in his closet. He didn't remember putting that there, so he went towards it. Under the towel was a bunch of stolen purses and wallets, some jewelry and electronics included in the pile. "What is this?" he yelled, falling on the floor, the pain momentarily forgotten. Where did you get these from?" Izuku asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His mind was racing with horror and confusion. "These were stolen. From people. By him? No, not me. Right? I'm gonna hurl." A wave of nausea washed over him as the implications piled up. If anyone found out, if his mother found out, he'd be labeled a criminal, a villain. His heart pounded harder, fear gripping him like a vice. "What have I gotten myself into? I told you I'd take care of the rest. These are souvenirs from our first feast." Hands still shaking. Izuku made sure the door was locked and then he searched through the pile for any information on who it belonged to. "Come on, IDs, driver's license, bank cards, anything." His lungs started working overtime to keep him awake. Then a black sludge crawled from his left shoulder. Venom had taken a smaller form to communicate with him outside of his head. Izuku jumped slightly. Where did you get these from?" "Don't worry," Venom reassured, though his undertone was anything but comforting. "I simply did what a hero would do and took care of a few bad people. Too bad you're too frail for me to do this often. You should have seen how mangled you were." Venom chuckled lightly. Now it was Izuku's heart's turn to work overtime as it pounded in his chest. He scrambled to his feet and rushed to the window. The streets seemed clean and peaceful, but his gut was telling him something else. Or is that his new roommate telling him something? Turning on the living room TV, he hoped for some regular news like the weather or some entertainment like the superhero shows he watched. But then the news report flashed across the screen only to confirm his fear. Breaking news. Several bodies were discovered in the downtown area early this morning, victims of a grotesque attack. Police are investigating the grisly scene. As of now, we have one confirmed victim named Kenji Hikiai. Izuku shut the TV off and was met by his grim expression on the black screen. His blood ran cold. That alley was a familiar one, it was a couple of minutes away from his house. Did we do that?" he whispered, sinking to the floor and crawling into a fetal position as the weight of it all fell upon him. "I did what your heroes would do," Venom replied, his tone more serious now, almost as if what he did was the obvious thing to do. "You want to attend that hero school, so I took the first step for both of us." Izuku looked up, his face pale but his eyes steely. Was all he could say before looking back down. Ever since he was a child, ever since All Might's debut, all he wanted to be was a hero, and when he turned 5 and got nothing, he didn't know what to do with himself. Life had gone downhill from there as his other classmates and old friends started getting their quirks. Due to that, they all left him behind. But with Venom on his side, he had a chance to reach his goal. But the news report. What Venom did. Could he really accept that? Could he trust the creature inside him? Did he even have a choice? "You won't get another chance after this." Venom interrupted his thoughts as if he could sense his train of thought. Izuku's hands trembled as he thought about it, the description that the news gave about those thugs replayed in his mind. Venom did this and was brutal, unrelenting and merciless. But then so were the thugs. Now that I think about it, a few of the hero documentaries that I read had heroes who were born with what the public called villainous quirks. But they also showed their tenacity and determination and how they overcame the public's prejudice and became heroes that went down in history. If Izuku could control whatever Venom was, he too could save people. "I can finally be the hero I've always dreamed of becoming." A minute passed in silence. "All right, let's do it." He looked up as he answered, his eyes blazing with determination. "Hell yeah." The symbiote cheered, "Together no one will stand a chance. But first we set some ground rules if you want to keep living in me. No more killing, we do this my way." Izuku stared Venom down, trying his best to hide his fear. "I can see your fear." Venom grunted in disagreement. "Fine," he finally answered with a hint of reluctance. "But I will remind you that I need brains to survive. If anyone threatens us, I won't hesitate to feast." Izuku flinched at the last part but nodded slowly, feeling a hint of excitement and relief despite everything. "We'll figure this out. Together. But no more. Whatever was last night." "Deal," Venom agreed, though Izuku could hear the slight amusement in his response. As he unclenched his fist, the tension in his body began to ease, though the pain in his limbs lingered, a reminder that his life just took a big turn. But now his strange ally could help him truly achieve his dream, if he kept his end of the deal. Izuku rested on the living room couch. He had made himself some snacks, tater tots for himself and some bacon via Venom's request. Despite the conversation he had earlier, the snacks did help. He was trying to process everything while watching videos on HeroTube on the computer. The soft glow of the computer screen illuminated the dark living room, casting shadows that flickered with each movement on the screen. Izuku's fingers drummed nervously on the desk as he watched the video, the sound of HeroTube's upbeat theme song almost lost in the background hum of the computer fan. He would sometimes zone out during the videos only to be pulled back in by Venom. This time as he was processing everything, the computer made a beep and a notification appeared on the corner of his screen. Izuku didn't recognize who the message was from. It had a random number, so he expected it to be a scam. He clicked on it to delete it, but the messenger sent another message. "Hi Midoriya, this is Momo Yaoyorozu. I was wondering if you'd like to meet up later for the tea we discussed. I apologize for asking on such short notice, but I would love to be able to thank you properly for saving me. Please let me know if you're available." Izuku blinked, and then again and then a few more times before he was interrupted. "Respond to the message," Venom exclaimed. "All right." With shaking hands, he hovered his hands over the keyboard. Even then he wouldn't move. He had suspected that Venom was messing with his body like before, but soon realized that that was just an excuse. Izuku stared at the blinking cursor, his hands trembling over the dusty keyboard. Izuku stared at the blinking cursor, his hands hovering over the keyboard. What if she's just being polite? What if she regrets it once we actually meet up? The thought made his stomach twist in knots. What if I mess this up? What if she realizes I'm not worth her time? He could almost hear Kaken's mocking voice in his head, calling him a worthless Deku. But then he remembered the smile on Momo's face, how genuinely she had thanked him. Maybe, just maybe, she did want to be his friend. What should I say? Izuku turned to the only and last person he could. All signs of fear of Venom transferred to the fear of the message. "Don't ask me. Put on your big boy pants and do it yourself." If Izuku could stutter in text, he would have a bad case of it. He had to respond soon since she was able to see that he read her text. A flurry of emotions rumbled in his stomach. After hearing about the news and everything with Venom, going out with a beautiful girl for some tea sounded amazing, but also very, very terrifying. This would be his first time out with anyone besides his mom. It didn't take a genius to know that only socializing with your mother was not enough to prepare you for a girl. But again, he wanted to see her, especially if he could focus on something other than the parasite inside him that casually mauled 4 thugs overnight. "Don't keep her waiting, kid. She's asking you on a date." Venom's voice slithered into his thoughts, dripping with a playful, teasing curiosity. "How interesting." Izuku flushed a bright red. "It's not a date. She's just wanted to drink tea," he whispered fiercely, glancing around as if someone might overhear. "She just wants to thank me, no other intentions. I'm sure it'll be a one-time thing, then she'll forget about me. Then she'll go back to her big house and dash." Izuku nearly broke down, holding himself. Before it could get worse, Venom intervened. "I did not sense any malice in her when I saved her. Don't sell yourself short, kid. Here, watch this." Whoa. Izuku jumped at the familiar feeling of paralysis that Venom gave him, only that this time it wasn't as bad. Izuku was scooted up to the edge of the couch. "Oh, ouch." "Bear with the pain for a moment," Venom said. The similar black tendrils escaped through Izuku's fingers and covered his hands in the tendrils. Venom reached for the computer and started typing. "Hey Momo. I'd love to meet up with you ASAP. Just let me know where and when and I'll be there." And sent. The symbiote pulled away from the computer, the tendrils retracting back inside, feeling accomplished. "No and oh, what did you send? Please delete, delete, delete." Izuku rushed back up, moving the mouse around to try and undo their mistake. But not even a second after it was sent, Momo had read it and was already typing. Momo's reply popped up. "There is a cozy tea shop in Kiyoshi Ward Shopping Mall. We can meet up there at 1 and head to the tea place. Hope to see you soon." Izuku's heart raced as he replied with a simple, "Sure thing." "Her reply makes it sound that she is eager to see you," Venom taunted. "You won't have to worry about anything." This seemed to calm Izuku down a bit. Maybe you're right. This could be another opportunity for him to make his first friend. Suddenly, Izuku started flaring up again in a bigger panic. "It's almost noon. I won't make it in time." "Well, let's get going. Change out of your onesie into something better," he teased. "I'll take care of the rest." Although he didn't understand what Venom meant by that, Izuku listened to him and changed into. Izuku swallowed hard, nodding to himself. "Okay. Let's do this." Izuku quickly scanned the time on the computer. 11:52 a.m. Crap. He put on his red sneakers and rushed out the front door. With the wind flowing through his green hair, Izuku pushed past his limit and ran to the bus station. "I won't make it in time. There's no way I can get there fast enough," he whispered, passing by his neighbors. Relax, Izuku. Venom's voice echoed, I can get us there early. Izuku stumbled when he tried to stop. He leaned against the wall to listen to Venom. What do you mean? I gave you a strength boost when you saved that girl. I can give you a minor speed boost, a sliver of what I can really do. Venom's tone was tempting, nearly persuasive. You ready? Izuku hesitated. He still felt sore from Venom's outing. Also, the stolen goods and the news report flashed through his mind, but those memories were washed away of the thought of making a new friend, the thought of Momo. He wasn't going to accept any kind of payment she would offer him. He was there for the possible friendship. I don't think we can use quirks, or rather powers, in public places, he said, his voice trembling slightly. He hid into an alley in case Venom did something that would gather unwanted attention. If you're careful, no one will notice. Let's stay as small as possible and no authority will get in our way. Alright, fine. How do I do it? Just think of it as running normally. You're not used to it, so it'll keep you stable. Trust me, you'll be fine. Right, we're partners, correct? I'll trust you, Izuku said, holding a determined look as he stepped out of the alley. Steeling himself, he took a deep breath. Okay. Just a little bit. Enough to make it before one. Here we go, Venom said with satisfaction in his voice. Suddenly, a sting coursed through Izuku's body. It was similar to when he first saw Venom in the mirror, but the pain was much more tolerable this time. His veins turned into the dark color they were before, but it wasn't as visible as the first time. His muscles tensed and he felt a rush of power, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It wasn't too overwhelming, but at the same time, it felt exhilarating. Whoa! He whispered, feeling a hum of power beneath his skin. Don't get too excited, kid. This is just 1% of what I can do. Anything else and your body will explode. Now run. Izuku held back a shriek at the information. Instead, he turned towards the train station and bolted. He covered over a couple blocks in just a few steps, and with Venom's assistance, he didn't crash or run into any one authority that could potentially stop him. The world moved in slow motion as he sped up, the cool air flowing through his bushy hair. He reached the train station at 12:20, panting heavily but also amazed at how quickly he got there. But he nearly fell to his knees when he got there. The station was empty. He looked at the time chart for the train and he had missed it by 5 minutes. No. Izuku gasped, his heart sinking as he realized that despite his newfound power, he was still too late. His shoulders slumped in defeat, the realization that he won't make it crushed his spirits. What am I going to do now? Get up, Venom said, his tone a mix of excitement and challenge. We will make it. How? The next train will get here in an hour and we're already late as it is. Izuku held his chest as he started hyperventilating. Calm the hell down. We don't need the train, Venom interrupted, his tone almost sounding daring. Before Izuku could protest, Venom took control, his body moving on autopilot as he jumped onto the tracks. What are you doing? Izuku yelped, his feet pounding the gravel as Venom guided him onto the tracks. Run. Venom commanded, the adrenaline kicking in. We'll get there in no time. With no other options and the clock ticking, Izuku pushed his fear and doubts aside and chose to trust Venom take the lead again. His legs moved faster and faster than he thought possible, each step propelling him forward with inhuman speed. Izuku just hoped no hero or police officer would notice him. The gravel crunched under his sneakers as he bolted down the tracks, the metal rails glinting under the midday sun. His muscles and fibers were still sore from Venom's outing, and the pain of using his power again had a few tears sliding off his face. Venom's energy pushed him forward, the wind drying his eyes, but he didn't dare protest to slow down. His heart pounded in his chest, each breath burning in his lungs as the world blurred around him. The fear of missing the train was quickly replaced with the exhilaration of the raw power literally coursing through his veins. This is more like it, hell yeah. In the far distance, the lights of the Kiyoshi Ward shopping mall came into view, and for the first time, Izuku felt a spark of hope igniting. They were actually going to make it. Despite the craziness of the situation, Izuku wore a small smile on his face. Who knew that having a symbiote as a partner could be so much fun? As they got closer to the mall, Venom leaped off the tracks and only a nearby roof. Izuku was amazed at how he cracked the concrete as he landed. His shoes didn't have a scratch on them. Catching his breath, he looked at the mall from afar with a sense of accomplishment. Izuku straightened up and fixed his breathing. We did it. Of course, we were awesome. Izuku nodded in agreement, but the slow realization of what they had just done was settling in. Not only was this a test of Venom's power, but also the beginning of something much more that little Izuku could ever dream of. They landed back on the ground and walked towards the mall's entrance. He couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and trepidation for what lay ahead. As Izuku entered the mall, he found his gaze lingering on people for longer than he usually did, analyzing them in a sharpness that felt foreign. It was as if Venom's senses were now a part of him. The heartbeat in the young lady hanging out with her friends, the smell of their organs and perfume they put on. He was almost caught staring at a burly man with a briefcase. He thought about how easily he could take him down. He shook his head, trying to clear his intrusive thoughts. This isn't me. This isn't a hero. Izuku thought, shivering as Venom chuckled in the deepest parts of his mind. Izuku scanned the mall, searching for the tall, dark-haired girl. Since his phone was out of commission till further notice, he knew that he wouldn't be able to communicate with her. Izuku had pulled all of his savings from his all-might piggy bank for this trip. He couldn't shake the memory of the expensive things Momo had when they first met. What he had wouldn't even cover a fraction of her world. She's a Yaoyorozu, of course that's expected. One of the mall maps read 12:55, so he was on time. Now came the hard part, finding her. His eyes wandered the mall, being careful to not get lost, scanning the faces of every person around. But after a few minutes passed with no success, a hollow feeling began to settle within him. Was she really willing to show up? Had this been a ploy that rich, snobby kids pulled? He glanced around nervously, half expecting a camera crew to pop out and ridicule him for even showing up. Ugh, stop with your self-deprecating. Venom interrupted, a hint of annoyance in his tone. Look, I'll search for her. Take a deep breath in and tell me what you feel. Izuku obeyed and inhaled deeply. Ha! At the peak of his breath, he felt a tinge of sweetness, almost like peaches. With a hint of books and ink. Izuku kept using his nostrils, causing a few bystanders to stare. He shied away in embarrassment, taking a seat in a nearby bench before asking, "What was that just now? Do I really have to explain it?" Venom sighed. There was a moment of silence between the two before he gave up and lashed out, "You have enhanced smell now. I just targeted it to follow that girl from before." "Whoa, cool," Izuku praised, "but it'd be weird if she saw me smelling to find her. Best to be subtle." Izuku shut his eyes, inhaling lightly. As he focused, the smells sharpened into vivid colors behind his closed eyelids, some strong, others faint. One stood out, a warm red beacon of sweetness and ink. "She is here." He straightened up and slowly made his way to her. "Thanks, Venom." Izuku whispered. "You are welcome." Venom echoed. Once he was close enough to where he would be able to find her, Izuku stopped relying on his smell and only used his sight, which even then was impressive. His ears twitched slightly, which kind of freaked him out. He needed to focus a bit more to single out her voice. Just like his enhanced smell, his ears could most likely single out voices. Just like the comic books, Izuku awed, holding the urge to geek out. "Control yourself, you must look cool in front of her," Venom advised, seeming to be on the edge of smacking Izuku. "All right," he tried to single out her voice again. About a minute later, he saw a pristine hand wave in his direction from afar. Izuku slowly made his way there, passing by the crowded area. It wasn't until he laid eyes on her that he realized how underdressed he was. Although his shoes never got ruined from sprinting over the train tracks, they did pick up tons of dust on the way that he forgot to clean out. No to mention his bushy hair was all over the place from the wind of the trip. He wore the best shirt he could find that was a blue-collar shirt with a white t-shirt that displayed "mall shirt" on it. Lastly, his khaki shorts had bulges from where his pockets were from all of the bills and change he had from his piggy bank. "What a mess," he murmured. "Yes, you do look like shit," Venom cackled. The beautiful girl walking towards him wore an elegant outfit that complemented her demeanor. She wore a crisp red blouse with a subtle ruffle at the neckline, tucked neatly into a high-waist lavender A-line skirt that swayed as she walked. A light cardigan, sharing the same color as her skirt, was tied casually around her waist. He heard the distant clicks of her simple yet chic ballet flats that matched her outfit. Finally, she held a small pink crossbody bag that completed her look. He caught his breath at her dark hair. Unlike when he first met her, it cascaded freely down her shoulders, framing her face beautifully. Her silver earrings caught the sunlight, adding a touch of sparkle to her already radiant smile. "Whoa," was all Izuku could mutter. "She's something else." Venom had forced his hand to wave back mechanically since he was too distracted. "Control yourself." Izuku lightly smacked his cheeks. "Hey Midoriya. I hope I didn't keep you waiting," said Momo, her voice tender and sweet. She flashed him a smile that nearly blinded him. No, not at all. I just got here too." He scratched the back of his head in embarrassment. "I'm glad." Now please follow me, I will show you the tea shop, Momo said, waving her hand to follow her. As they stepped into the tea shop, Izuku's eyes widened in awe. The shelves on the walls were lined up with colorful tins, each labeled with exotic names that he wouldn't try to pronounce, and the air was filled with a soothing aroma of freshly brewed teas. The whole establishment had an air of sophistication that was completely foreign to him. Whoa! Izuku blurted out, awe widening his eyes at the display of colorful tins and elegant decor. Never in a million years did he think he'd step foot in a place this fancy. But as he looked around, the disapproving stares of other customers hit him like a wave. His heart sank. Midoriya. Momo's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I hope my hands aren't sweaty. Don't get horny there, tiger. Venom joked. Stop that. Izuku whispered. He hadn't been quiet enough as Momo's herd turned to face him and released his hand. Oh, I apologize. I shouldn't have touched you without asking. Momo returned her hand to her side and turned away. Izuku could barely see the distant look on her face. That's not a problem, Izuku claimed, making sure to keep his voice low but audible. He hadn't noticed that he reached out for Momo's hand subconsciously, holding her confidently. I'm just overwhelmed. I've never been in a place this fancy. Feels like I'm in an entirely new world. He scratched the back of his head with his free hand. It was then that he noticed where his other hand was. His heart dropped at the sight. He could hear Venom laughing in his thoughts. But then again, Momo wasn't letting go either. He glanced across the table from himself and looked at Momo, who sat with perfect posture with her free hand on her lap. Her warm smile eased some of his worries but also ignited other feelings to worry about. Fortunately for Izuku, Momo broke the silence. I'm glad you could make it in such short notice, Midoriya. I hope the journey here wasn't too troublesome? Her voice was smooth and sincere, eyes reflecting genuine concern. The waitress came along and gave them their menus that they each took with their free hand. Izuku was looking through all of the tea jargon with a puzzled look in his eyes. I didn't know so many different teas existed. I hope you are not uncomfortable. I thought this place would be quiet so that we could enjoy ourselves. But if it's too much, we could go somewhere more simple. No, it's great really. Thanks for inviting me. He fidgeted slightly with the edge of the menu, doing his best to maintain eye contact but struggling against her attentive gaze. Wonderful. This is my favorite public tea shop. They have an extensive variety of teas from all around the world, including my favorite, Imperial Golden Tips. What's your favorite tea? She leaned in forward with their hands still connected, showing earnest interest. On reflex, Izuku backed up. So close. I've actually never had tea. My mom is the tea enjoyer in my house. But since you invited me, I'm willing to try anything you recommend. A fire ignited in Momo's eyes, her free hand clenched into a fist. In that case, may I recommend their jasmine green tea? It's light and has a very soothing flavor. I think you might enjoy it. It was clear that this was something she was interested in. Sure, I'll get just that. He relaxed a bit, appreciating her guidance. Excellent choice. She signaled the waitress with a graceful wave, placing their orders with clear and polite dictation. When she finished, she turned back to Izuku. Momo's face turned earnest, catching Izuku off guard. I want to thank you properly for what you did for me the other day. If it weren't for you, I don't know. She lost focus near the end, almost as if she was replaying the events in her mind. Everything that happened felt so real that the thought of him not being there filled her with dread. Izuku felt her hand shivering lightly, so he squeezed it in reassurance. You don't have to finish, and I didn't do much. Any hero would do the same. He scratched the back of his head, his tinged pink. I'm just glad you're okay. Momo's fearful expression lightened. Izuku took a napkin from the dispenser and held it to her. Based on her reaction, she must not have realized she was tearing up. Izuku leaned and did his best to wipe away the tears. All gone? He said with a smile. This time, it was Momo's turn to squeeze his hand. Thanks. Thank you, Midoriya. Momo replied, wearing a smile of gold. That was good. Not now, Venom. Izuku thought, resisting the urge to chuckle at the symbiote's jest. Take your time, you don't have to rush it. His eyelids lowered, trying his best to seem approachable. Momo took a few deep breaths. When I made him home, I told my parents before anything else. I was terrified. I was afraid that they would punish me for letting this happen. Midoriya? He straightened up at the sound of his name, giving her his undivided attention. Please don't laugh, but have you ever dreamed of becoming a hero? Yes, I have. I wouldn't laugh at you for that. I too dreamed of becoming a hero. With me being the heiress to my parents, it was expected of me to stay grounded and prepare to take over the company. But when I was little, I sneaked outside of our garden, was almost kidnapped by enemies of my parents, most likely to be held as ransom. But the hero saved me and brought me home just like you. My parents were furious, rightfully so. She giggled and looked up to Izuku, who was watching with an attentive gaze. My parents closed me off from the outside after that. They paid for private tutors, and whenever I was allowed outside, I had multiple men watching over me. In return, I was secluded from other children. Their parents kept them away from me and I wasn't able to make any friends. I love my parents, they're all I have. But I don't think I want what they want for me. The day you saved me was the first time they let me out by myself, and we both know how it turned out. The only reason I was able to meet up with you today was because I agreed to having guards around me. We were being watched? Oh shit. I didn't sense them. This tea shop and many places in this mall are owned by my family, Momo explained, smiling softly at his reaction. The waitress is one of my guards. So are most of the other patrons here. Izuku's mouth went dry. Guards? Around him this whole time? His heart raced. He glanced around again, realizing the casual glances from other customers were anything but casual. Don't worry, I know you won't give them a reason to act. I wanted to prove to my parents that I've got what it takes to be a hero and that I do not need people watching over me. But I panicked. It reminded me of when I was almost kidnapped. Her free hand tightened on the tablecloth. I'm sorry, I invited you as a way to repay you, but I'm wasting your time by telling you my life story. Izuku could see the sadness in her eyes, and something inside him just snapped. Without thinking, he stood up, their hands still connected, surprising even himself. The sudden movement caused a ripple effect in the tea shop, as the guards all around them tensed up, ready to act. You're not wasting my time. Izuku blurted out, surprising even himself. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing heart. I'm really glad you told me all this, Momo. I know what it's like to have a dream that seems impossible. I've always wanted to be a hero too, but... He hesitated, feeling the weight of his confession. But seeing the sincerity in Momo's eyes, he decided to continue. But I was born quirkless. And in a world where almost everyone has one, it feels like a hopeless dream. Even my mother didn't know what to tell me. People, friends, classmates, they all made fun of me for it. Called me Deku, which means someone who can't do anything, someone worthless. I know I can't make my dream come true, but I want yours to become true. Momo's eyes widened, a mix of shock and sympathy filling her expression. Midoriya. I had no idea. Izuku gave her a soft, reassuring smile. It's okay. I mean, it was still is hard, really hard. But I've been doing my best to carry on. And you know what, he pointed at himself and her, meeting you, being able to help you, it made me feel like maybe it's not impossible. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence with only the sound of her guards sipping on their tea, their earlier tension easing into warmer. And then, with a slight nod, they moved on to lighter topics, each feeling a bit lighter for having had shared their burdens. Finally, Momo spoke up again, her voice more confident now. Midoriya, if you ever need help with anything, I want you to know that I'm here for you. I believe in you. Izuku's heart skipped a beat. Thanks, Yaoyorozu. That really means a lot to me. And I'm here for you too whenever you need it. The two shared a smile, the tension between them easing into something much more comfortable, almost natural. They spent the next few minutes talking about lighter topics, their hands still connected across the table. The tea cooled, and the world outside the tea shop faded away as they both found something they had been searching for. Someone who truly understood. Izuku tried to pay for at least his tea, but Momo refused. The shop workers said it was on the house, probably a perk that came with being the owner's daughter. Momo got his attention with a polite wave. She reached her hand out with his broken phone. It looked to be in a worse condition than this morning. It fell out of your pocket before you gave your speech. He took it from her, looking embarrassed. Momo leaned towards him to try to get a glimpse of his expression, possibly in a teasing manner. Tea, thanks, Izuku responded, devoid of his previous confidence. I saving up for another phone at the moment. Although he wanted the chance to pay for a pretty girl's meal, he was kinda glad they ate for free. Unfortunately, he would have to miss a few All Might figure releases, but he had to set his priorities. We should replace yours today as a thank you gift. No, he waved his hands frantically. Having tea with you is more than enough. Izuku hadn't realized what he said until Momo's cheeks turned a slight pink. Please, Midoriya, it would make me happy to assist you with this, she offered kindly, her expression hopeful. Well, take the offer, kid. She's practically rolling the red carpet for you. Venom enticed. I assure you it's no trouble at all. With a form of communication we will be able to meet up again. It's an investment for future heroes. She hit him with an adorable face. Whether it was accidental or intentional, it worked very well on him. If it's actually not a problem. Okay Yaoyorozu, he bowed shamefully. Perfect, follow me. She wrapped her arm around his and dragged him to the phone store. No one noticed the pink shade all over the boy's face as he was pulled along. His hands trembled as he held the box in his hands. When Momo insisted in buying him a phone, he figured that he could replace the phone for the same model. But it turned out that Izuku's phone was no longer in production. Momo overheard that conversation and decided to buy him the newest and most expensive model, with the most storage in the color red. She did it too quickly before he could protest. She quickly took out a pen and wrote a message down on the phone box for Izuku to read when he got home. Momo handed the box over to him and he saw the phone box and the color she chose. It appears we are matching, Momo said with a cheeky smile. Her phone color was a dark green similar to his hair color while the one she got him was a red similar to her blouse color. Why yes. Thank you so much Yaoyorozu. He bowed his head as low as possible. It's a pleasure and please call me Momo. She smiled warmly, pleased at his acceptance. All right, Momo. You can call me Izuku. He returned her smile, feeling a newfound friendship forming between them. Sure thing Izuku. She winked at him, laughing as the boy turned tomato red. Izuku looked at mall map once more, seeing that it was now 2:30. They still had some time in their hands and Izuku wasn't going to let himself be the receiver today. In the distance he saw an ice cream shop. Want some ice cream? He turned to her with a nervous gaze. I would be delighted. She met his shivering gaze with her excited one. Out of all the crazy things he's done in life, this next one took the top. Izuku held out his arm for her. She hid her surprise well from him and wrapped her arm around his tightly. The faint chatter of families and children laughing surrounded them as they sat at a table. Izuku took a lick of his kiwi-flavored ice cream, the cool tangy sweetness spreading across his tongue, grounding him in the moment. As they sat together, Izuku hadn't realized how the tension from earlier had slowly melted away. When was the last time I did this with anyone? He wondered. There was something comforting of being here. With Momo. A normal moment. She's nothing like I expected. Kind, thoughtful. And she has the same dream as me. The thought made him feel all fuzzy inside his chest and he couldn't help but smile. Kiwi, right? Momo raised an eyebrow with a playful smile. My usual pick is cheesecake, it's safe choice. But sometimes you have to step out of your comfort zone, so my choice today is peach. She waved the cone around, being careful not to spill it. Izuku smiled, her words resounding in his mind. Yeah, maybe next time I'll try cheesecake myself. Izuku held out his ice cream cone in front of her. A tea toast to new friendships? Momo's eyes widened at his words and for a moment, her usual composure faltered, genuinely motivated by his sincerity. Izuku swore he saw her eyes tear up slightly. And to achieving your dream, he added with a shy smile, holding out his cone like a toast. Their cones clinked softly, and Momo's expression softened into something more vulnerable. Thank you Izuku, she said, her voice quieter now, as if Izuku had said the thing she needed to hear the most. I'll do everything I can to help you too, she added, her eyes reflecting the warmth of their newfound connection. I saved that memory for you, reassured Venom. Thanks. As they walked out of the ice cream shop, hand in hand, Izuku couldn't help but glance at Momo's smiling face, which only made him want to smile more. Despite everything that's happened up to now, meeting Venom, the craziness of running on train tracks, this moment felt right. Screw you Kaken. Maybe I'm not such a Deku after all. When Izuku Midoriya finally made it home, he collapsed onto his bed, the weight of the day's events. And the memory of Momo's smile swirled in his mind. He couldn't help but get flustered at the reminder of what he did. Today was something else. A grin crept up his face. And this is just the beginning. Walking home from school, Izuku was scribbling on his hero journal. During lunch when he was alone he was brainstorming ideas for what kind of hero Izuku could be, with Venom replying here and there. He was on his 14th volume and had to admit that he never thought he would be writing about himself in it. All at once, his suit ideas and hero names filled the pages. Izuku had thought about his name being something related to All Might, the #1 hero. But Venom immediately shoot down any and all suggestions that had any relevance to the hero. This was going to be his own thing and it should not be branching off someone else's idea. When Izuku got home, his mother was on the couch watching television. Probably a new episode of her favorite foreign soap operas. Whenever his mom got interested in a show, there was no stopping her from hogging the TV and recording the episodes for later. Izuku did his best to greet her without looking at the TV since he knew he would also get distracted. "I'm going to borrow the computer for something in my room," he said, lifting the laptop and carrying it to his room. His mother replied, "Ah-ha," while reacting to her show. Izuku could only smile at that. Izuku changed from his uniform into casual clothes. After the laptop finished booting up, he searched for the mall bag from yesterday and pulled out the heavy box. On it was displayed a big red phone with the words 16 Pro might. He wasn't a tech-savvy guy like most of his classmates, so opening a new account on a phone that is over 10 years advanced will cause him to struggle a bit. But at least if he did this, there wouldn't be a possibility of his mom reading his and Momo's texts. It's not like there was anything to hide, but knowing his mom, her finding out could send her into shock from her son texting and meeting up with a stranger. The tutorial Izuku found helped him get the basic setting up down, creating an account, email, etc. Izuku kept searching the phone box and pulled out the charger and stickers that came with it. He had also used the phone case Momo had got him, which also matched her own. It had to be a coincidence, right? "Not likely," the symbiote answered, seeming uninterested. Then what could that mean? Surprisingly, Venom hummed in thought for a moment before answering, "No idea, you're human. Relationships are. Confound. Don't I know it?" Anyway, Izuku managed to get to the home screen and was also stopped from making his wallpaper anything All Might by Venom. Almost like Venom had some sort of vendetta out for him, but he decided not to pursue answers. Finally, the box had a couple of scribbles on the bottom that he hadn't noticed. It fell from his bed. Upon further inspection, Izuku realized it was a phone number. It was written elegantly with a small smile at the end. Izuku used his newfound phone knowledge to add it as his first contact. Although he didn't show it, he felt a bit proud that he was able to add a contact without any help. He sent out a text saying, "Hello?" Izuku couldn't even close the app before the person responded, "Hello, Izuku. Is my gift working properly for you? I'm glad we are able to communicate now. I sent a message earlier but figured that you were still in school. I apologize. Also, this is Momo. Yaoyorozu. Momo Yaoyorozu." "Wow," Izuku said, dumbfounded. He couldn't help but smile at the last part of the message. "That girl is very persistent," Venom said, sounding just as shocked as him. Izuku's hands shook, too hesitant to reply. "I finally got a girl's number." With a hint of confusion on his face, he realized that the number she had written on the phone box was different than the one that she had used to text him the first time to set up there to hang out. Turns out it was just another perk of being rich that she could have multiple phones to contact him with. What to send, what to send. His fingers hovered over the lit-up keyboard, musing through his response options. Izuku continued to hesitate, staring at the blinking cursor. "Okay, you got this, Izuku. You somehow managed to talk to a pretty girl and got her number. You can send a simple text." Izuku puffed up his chest, holding his breath and doing his best to maintain a poker face. Yet he didn't notice the flush creeping across his face. Maybe a simple hi could work? No, it's too simple. She'll think I'm boring. Maybe I should write her an essay of gratitude for the gift? And nerd out to her in text? No way, he muttered, biting his nails. After a few minutes, Izuku managed to type out a mediocre thank you response. Although he also hesitated before pressing send, Momo once again replied immediately. After they got that out of the way, they continued talking back and forth. Izuku noticed the time on the top left of his phone, eyes widening. "We've been talking for an hour?" It was around the same time that Momo needed to get into her studies with her private tutor. Although it did bum him out that they stopped a bit early, he understood. Izuku looked at his All Might calendar and had a few dates filled out for upcoming assignment due dates and exams, so he also took this time to prepare. All of the fuzzy feelings from yesterday fired up again inside him, forming a cheeky grin on his face again. "Plus, I think women like smart guys." "Stop thinking that. I can smell your excitement from a mile away, be careful not to drool," Venom teased. 2 hours went by with him studying. Izuku was reviewing and practicing his English when Venom spoke up. "Ugh, this is a waste of time. We don't need to be locked up decaying on this table. We should be out there, feasting and growing stronger. Isn't that what you want?" The words Venom used created a tingling sensation in his stomach. He caught his breath and clenched his chest tightly. Izuku released his grip on his chest once his arms started going out of control. A faint bundle of black roots began traveling down his arm and ending at his fingertips. Izuku gritted his teeth as the sharp tendrils snaked down his arm, his muscles twitching uncontrollably. It wasn't just pain, it was a feeling of being consumed, like Venom was sinking deeper into him, fusing their bond even further. "Arg." Izuku gritted his teeth at the excruciating pain, doing his best to keep his voice down to not gather his mother's unwanted attention. He bit down on his shirt to muffle his cries. In the next instant, the pain was gone and his hands returned to normal. "What was that?" he asked, wiping the tears from his eyes. "This is a warning," Venom hissed, his voice suffocating his mind like smoke. "I let you have your way once, but that deal was temporary." Venom's voice shifted from his usual tone, taking on a sinister edge. "I only agreed to our deal before so you would drop it. Whatever your morals are on killing, they don't matter. If I don't get my fill, I'll devour everything starting with you." That eerie warning gave Izuku goosebumps all over. "Ah well," Izuku stammered, trying to recollect himself. "I do, but UA isn't for another year and a half. And we can't feast on anyone, whether or not you hold your end of the deal. Without sustenance I will unravel, Izuku. And if I lose control, you'll lose more than your precious morals." Venom's voice slithered through Izuku's mind, sending a chill down his spine. "Your liver, your heart. I wonder how long they would last. Heroes? They don't kill," Izuku whispered, his voice trembling as his grip on his pencil tightened, knuckles white. "They protect people. That's what I want to do. There has to be something, anything, that fills you. Without crossing that line." His chest tightened, fear coiling around his heart. "I can't become that kind of monster." If what Venom said was true, then he would be behind bars or worse before he could apply for UA. Some time ago, Venom had told him that he needed something called phenethylamine to keep himself sane, something that the brain produced. Izuku couldn't figure out what else contained it so that he could use it as a substitute. But now that he had a new phone. Fine. Izuku swallowed the lump in his throat. I'll see what I can do. But we're not hurting anyone, only really bad people." He let out a breath, trying to regain his composure. "But there's something else we need to do now before anything else." "What now?" Izuku lifted his still recovering finger, pointing towards his closet, specifically the towel covering a giant pile. Izuku kneeled beside it and removed the towel. Piled up, there were many stolen wallets, phones, and purses that Venom had obtained from his first nightly outing. He was still surprised he was able to hide them since Saturday. "I managed to find some type of ID and address. And with Momo's gift, I wrote them down in a list with this cool note-taking app. There's also this cool map that lets me choose the best and quickest route so that we don't risk my mom finding out that we left. We won't even have to rush, which means we don't run the risk of running into any nighttime heroes." Izuku said, his head held high. "Even if we did run into them, I'd take care of them with ease." Izuku only scratched the back of his head nervously. "I really suggest against it. I wouldn't want to have a mark on my record if I want to make it to you." "Fine, your way it is," Venom grumbled, a faint snarl lingering in his voice. "For now. But if this plan of yours fails, don't expect me to play nice." Yet, beneath the grumbling, there was a trace of something unfamiliar. Was it approval? Izuku clapped his hands together, his eyebrows furrowed with determination and a hint of fear. "I can't believe I'm going to sneak out. But first the snack for the go. Make sure it's meat." Venom chimed in. His legs trembled slightly. Heading back out to the living room, Izuku saw his mom at the table eating an evening snack. Her face brightened the moment she saw him. "Izuku, sweetie, have you finished your homework yet?" she asked, already pulling him in for a quick hug. "I made your favorite snack, cheese sandwiches. Thought you might need a study break." She smiled, that familiar, comforting warmth filling the room. "Homework's all set and done, Mom, thanks. I was just on my way to make something to eat." Izuku bit into the sandwich, a warm expression as he tasted the cheese. "Are there any more of these?" His mom turned around and back with a plate full of cheese sandwiches. "Ta-da," she said. Izuku chuckled. "Adorable." Izuku ate another sandwich and kept the rest for tonight. He sat down with his mom and asked her about her show, which led to her going on about it, with him listening to every word. "Oh dear, you won't believe the plot twist. But after I finished watching it, I got hooked in this other movie about a mother saving her kidnapped son. I had me at the edge of my seat the entire time. My heart was pounding like crazy and the ending almost made me cry." He and his mother were known to be very excessive criers, and as he didn't want to flood the apartment once again, he tried to soothe her. "Careful, Mom, we wouldn't want to disturb the neighbors this late. I think they still haven't forgiven us for last time." His mom wiped away her tears. "You're right, dear, but the thought of having someone take my dear Izuku away just fills me with rage." His mom then clenched her fists together, steam shooting from her ears. She continued to play with his bushy hair, which Izuku reveled in. "I'll always be here with you, Mom." He wrapped his arms over her short stature, making sure to enjoy their hug completely. Unfortunately, his words sent his mother into another crying spiral which took a bit longer to calm down the second time. Eventually, his mom helped him fix up the last of his snacks before wrapping them up. He looked at the clock and saw that it was still early despite the sun having set. Izuku let his mom know that he was heading to bed early tonight, and that he needed the extra rest if he was going to pass his exams. "You go ace those, Izuku. I know how smart you are." The most radiant smile nearly blinded him. Even then, he caught a glimpse of her tired eyes, the narrow eye bags building up. Izuku couldn't suppress the guilt turning his insides all over. His mom, the only person he had left, kissed his forehead before heading to her room herself. Izuku felt his stomach drop, a surge of guilt and fear bubbling inside him. He knew this deal with Venom could lead down a dangerous path, but the alternative, the thought of losing control, of losing himself, terrified him more. Izuku was perched on the roof of their apartment, his snack bag over his shoulder and another with the stolen goods. He fidgeted with his new phone, trying to set up the GPS properly. After that, he slid down his makeshift mask over his face. It resembled the number one hero's face with his golden hair aiming backward and that toothy smile glowing in the front. It had pained Izuku to have to rip up a few of his merchandise to make this. "Okay. 8 stops, all of them not too far. I got the route set up, now what, Venom? You are still not strong enough for me to take this seriously, but for starters we'll do this at 1%. Venom said you'll get used to that sting and then jump where you need to go." Izuku nodded in agreement, changing into a mediocre pouncing position. He aimed for the next closest rooftop in the direction the GPS pointed and leaped. He flew for a few seconds, the cool air hitting his face in the moonlight. His landing was anything but graceful as he face-planted into the roof, knocking over a couple of plant pots that lay there. He fell into a coughing fit, trying to clear out the dirt from his mouth and eyes. Venom grumbled at the humiliating performance. "This will be more difficult than I expected. Sorry, I thought it worked the same way as when I ran on the train tracks. You know, just move like you usually do." Izuku looked thoughtfully, his face covered in dirt and mud. After a sloppy job at cleaning himself, he looked at his phone. The closest house should be a couple blocks down. "I should be able to get the hang of this by tonight," he said, his dirty face beaming with determination before sliding his mask back on. He managed to leap a few more times without any major issues. It wasn't to say he was a fast learner, he still noticed many mistakes he made along the way, mainly keeping his balance. As they reached the first location, which was a big house about 5 minutes away from his home. Izuku had never gone too far from his house. The farthest he's been from home was when he went to the mall with Momo. Izuku shuffled through the goods to see which one matched this address. Eventually, he found it and left it in a place where the owner could see it without it running the risk of being stolen again. He made sure to leave a note on each doorstep saying, "Here's your property back. Take care." The next few deliveries went without a hitch, and Izuku grew more confident with his abilities. One last stop. Izuku landed on the sidewalk a few houses away from the last stop. He made his way on foot before Venom spoke up. "Don't cross that alley." Venom interrupted his stroll, his voice cautious. Wadash, before Izuku processed what Venom said, his hips twisted on their own, causing him to nearly lose his balance. He heard something cut the wind around him and zip by his neck. "An ambush, get ready," Venom screamed in his head. Izuku couldn't lift his hands up before their opponent's foot connected to his torso, sending him flying a few feet. Venom rotated his body in midair to land back on his feet, the pain in his torso dissipating. Now facing his opponent, Izuku couldn't help but gasp. His opponent was a girl with dirty blonde hair, only a few inches shorter than him. Her hair flew freely over her plain sifuku. Her dark blue skirt was tainted with blood, his enhanced smell notified him of it. His eyes momentarily locked into her golden ones, her clear exhaustion and desperation. The girl reached into her pockets again and threw more knives at him, each one just barely missing him. Venom allowed him to close the distance between the two as he jumped forward, holding both her arms with his own. He pinned her to the wall. The girl continued to struggle, trying to bite his hands with her sharp fangs. Izuku didn't budge and kept his grip rigid. Eventually the assailant tired out and her hands lay limp on her sides. "Who are you? Why are you attacking me?" He yelled at the girl across from him, yet she remained silent, almost as if she had given up. It was then that Izuku felt how thin her arms felt beneath her uniform. Her cheekbones were somewhat visible in the moonlight. Izuku loosened his grip on her. "What are you doing? She's weak, Izuku. Finish it." "What? No." He blurted out, his voice cracking as he tightened his grip on her again. Izuku felt a primal urge coil deep within him, an almost feral craving rising to the surface, his mouth watering up at the thought. He relentlessly shook his head, clearing out those thoughts. "We're not doing that, I won't let you hurt her." His heart raced, fear crawling up his chest, not from the girl under him, but a Venom showing what it meant to lose control. The girl beneath him stared up with confused golden eyes, and a hint of something else. Was that interest? A faint blush dusted her cheeks as her gaze locked onto his. It didn't help that Izuku was essentially talking to himself, making him appear even more unhinged. Despite the exhaustion in her limbs, her golden eyes glinted with amusement. She leaned forward just barely and whispered, "You're strong. But that outfit. Why aren't you finishing me off?" Her voice was breathless, yet dripping with a twisted curiosity. Izuku's heart skipped a beat, his hands trembling. "What's with this girl? I'm not a cop or anything, so I can't detain you, but please don't attack me." He loosened his grip enough to where the girl slouched against the wall, breathing heavily. He could see that the fight was out of her, but her golden eyes never departed from his, watching him with a strange mix of caution and fascination. Then, as if it was scripted, the girl's stomach growled in hunger, and that was when she finally looked away in embarrassment, her arms hugging her stomach. "She's hungry, that's why she's desperate, but why attack me?" Izuku thought, staring at the girl's blood-stained skirt. It must be her quirk. Against all warnings, Venom was putting off inside him. Izuku reached over his shoulder. His fingers brushed against the tin foil covering his mother's sandwiches. "The hell is wrong with you, Izuku? She's dangerous, do what heroes do and finish her." "I can't leave her like this, she's not evil," he whispered, not knowing if the girl could still hear him. Izuku held out a wrapped sandwich and an apple juice box. He hesitated for a second before handing them out to her. "Here, looks like you could use something to eat. I hope you like cheese and apple juice." The girl's golden eyes glowed in surprise, blinking rapidly at his unexpected action. Then, without another word, she snatched the sandwich and juice from his hands and started tearing into it with feral hunger. Izuku backed up, giving the girl space. He couldn't hold back his smile at her munching on the bread. There were a few crumbs on her face, so he went back to his bag and pulled out a couple of napkins for her. The girl was so focused on her sandwich that she didn't notice his hand being held out. Eventually he got closer and wiped her cheeks for her. "What are you doing out this late? Your uniform is messy. If you'd like, I could accompany you to your home? I won't say a word of what happened today." He reached his hand out to her, smiling endearingly. Meanwhile, just minutes earlier, the same blonde girl limped away from the convenience store, avoiding the cashier's yelling. She had failed at taking any food and was in no form capable of a fight, so when she was caught, she ran, the world spinning and turning with every step. It wouldn't take long for a hero to respond in case they had been called. And with the sunset, she could use the shadows to her advantage and escape. Once she was far enough from the store, she went from alleyway to alleyway in search of food. It wasn't until a figure in the sky flew over a block right in front of her. Her nose twitched as she caught a whiff of his scent. She licked her fangs with her tongue before following him. At some point he landed, possibly because he was tired from jumping around. The initial smell emanating from his bag grew more potent. She slowly slid out the knife in her sleeve and got ready to pounce whenever he showed up. His shadow got closer to the alleyway, and then it was time. The moment her knives had missed their mark was the moment she had internally admitted defeat. Anyone capable of dodging her knives was a monster, and since she spent the last of her stamina on the throws, there was nothing left at her disposal. "Why am I so weak?" Her vision blurred, and every move was sluggish, mediocre, and predictable. She threw her entire strength in the last kick, which landed. But he quickly recovered and slammed her against the wall at inhumane speeds. If the circumstances were different, any normal girl would be delighted to trade places with her. But this wasn't a normal situation. And she wasn't normal. Air left her lungs as she hit the wall, the world blurring in and out. She heard the boy talking to her, but she couldn't grasp his words. She blinked, breathing heavily. His hands closed around her wrists firmly, but his grip there was no intent to harm. "I'm caught?" The man, or rather boy, didn't harm or looked at her with any malice. At least not yet. She awaited the sound of the metal cuffs to wrap around her arms, but it never came. She built up the courage to stare her golden eyes at his emerald green orbs, trying to read his expression. He wasn't like the rest who only looked at her in fear, disgust, and shame. Rather, he looked at her with compassion and innocence. Soft, gentle. Maybe I could get used to those eyes on me. Instinctively, she bared her fangs, fighting the blush that crept up her face. Her mind spun, searching for an explanation. Was he toying with her, waiting for his backup to arrive and take her away for good? Maybe he was sent out to return her to her parents. The parents that didn't even want her. Not again, please. I can't leave her like this, she's not evil. The boy's failed attempt at a whisper reached her eyes. Those words almost made her cry, and she probably would have if she wasn't on the brink of dehydration. Then she was surprised again. He reached into his bag and handed her something? A sandwich? She reached out and grasped it, expecting it to be a trick. When he didn't pull away, she snatched it out of his hands, her stomach twisted painfully. She tore into the sandwich, her teeth sinking into the bread and relishing on the melted cheese. Then she sucked out all of the juice from its box in a mere second, barely tasting anything. Then a soft hand touched her, wiping away any mess she had around her lips. He's cleaning me? Why isn't he hurting me? The girl had never been shown kindness before. And as she met the boy's eyes again for the first time in a long while, she didn't know what to do. Izuku sprinted across the rooftops, the moon casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood below, returning home from his last delivery. His heart still raced, the memory of the encounter with the blonde girl playing over and over in his head. This had been his first fight as a pre-hero, and it was not what he expected. He could say she was dangerous, those knife throws were no joke, but also lost. He gripped his empty snack bag, his mind spinning. We should have finished her. Venom's voice slithered into his thoughts, full of disapproval. She attacked you. A bad person attacked you. You said that we should only eat bad people. Izuku shook his head, trying to shake those thoughts away. But some truth in what Venom said remained. Izuku remembered the look in her eyes. That desperation. That hunger. She wasn't a villain, at least I think, Izuku muttered under his breath, the wind catching his words. She looked lost and afraid. I think I knew what she felt with me being quirkless. It's not common that some people get unlucky with their quirks and are treated as outcasts. She was just trying to survive. I just wished I could have gotten her name. Sympathy? For something like her? Venom snarled, his tendrils curling around Izuku's heart. You're a fool. The weak are either prey or they become strong enough to devour others. Eat or be eaten. We wouldn't be having this conversation if she were stronger. Izuku remained silent, jumping across another rooftop with practiced ease. That's the point, Venom. She didn't have to be strong to be a threat, so she doesn't have to be strong to deserve help. I want to help people. We can help people, Venom. That's what heroes do. We don't have to cross that line. Heroes. With every passing day, Izuku held on to that dream. But he couldn't ignore the weight of Venom's hunger pulling him deeper into a world where morality blurred. Only 3 days had passed and Izuku could feel the changes in his heart. If this went on, would he be able to hold on to his dream? Much less achieve it? His thoughts were interrupted when he made it home. Carefully, he opened his bedroom window and slid back into his room, landing on his bed. His first mission was complete, but his mind was anything but at ease. The week went by without a hitch. Surprisingly, Kaken hadn't even talked to Izuku since that sludge attack. It meant that Izuku could wander the school halls without having to look over his shoulder constantly. After gathering his things, Izuku went out for a jog. He and Venom had been discussing ways to let Izuku use more than 1% of his power. The resolution was that if Izuku could put on some muscle, he would be able to start using Venom's abilities on his own without the drawback of breaking himself. Izuku also asked Venom not to use his healing on him as it felt like it was cheating. Everyone else was years ahead with quirk experience, so he would need to work twice as hard to catch up. It also helped that Izuku spent most of his childhood analyzing heroes and their quirks. This included their workout routine, techniques, and diets. With only a year and a few months for UA's entrance exam, he needed to use all of the time he had for this. Venom explained that although they achieved basic symbiosis, Izuku would start getting more passive abilities like his enhanced smell and sight. The next morning, Izuku woke up to a passing car that was a couple blocks away, which indicated that his enhanced hearing had come in. After his daily jog, he would head home and do strength training until failure, which ended quickly. Today he took a longer route than the one he usually took. You're going the wrong way, said Venom. I have enough to get you your chocolate. Plus, my quirk analysis journal is almost full, so I need to get myself a new one for the next volume. His companion remained silent for the rest of the jog, only making slight comments here and there. After leaving the store, Izuku made his way back home, passing by a local park. He pulled out a pair of earplugs he had bought and put them on. After his super hearing came it, he had been trying on a few pairs to see which would help him out the most. All of the pairs he had owned previously turned out as failures. As Izuku continued his jog, the faint thumping of music echoed in the far distance. He knew that the local park was popular for its street performers, but since the park was on a much longer route home, he didn't take it often. This made it more exciting for him to see it. As he got closer, the music became more intrusive by the step. He shrugged it off at first, letting his curiosity take control. The vibrations rattled his bones and eardrums, causing a slight ringing in his ears. When he turned the corner, he stumbled. What the hell is that? Venom roared inside his head, the sharp edge of his voice sending a jolt of panic through Izuku's chest, and the symbiote writhed beneath his skin as if trying to escape. Izuku stumbled, clutching his head, his vision blurring from the intense throbbing in his skull. He barely registered the box of chocolates falling out and onto the pavement. The sound wasn't just loud, it pierced through him, a sharp, unbearable sensation. Venom roared inside his head, adding to the cacophony. What's happening? He groaned. As soon as the music started, it ended right after. Izuku continued clutching his head as his ears recovered. He could hear Venom internally groaning in discomfort. Someone grabbed his hand. He turned upwards to see a silhouette without being able to register their face. Yo, you all right? Her voice pierced through the ringing in his ears, and Izuku blinked, his vision clearing to see a girl with short purple hair and a pair of headphones around her neck. Her raised eyebrow and wide eyes suggested that she wasn't used to people reacting like this to music. What was that painful sound? He asked, still rubbing his ears thoroughly. Harsh, dude, I wasn't playing it that loud. She placed a hand on her hip with sass, which quickly switched to worry as she knelt by his side. Shit, sorry, are you okay? She held her hand out, which he took. Izuku continued rubbing his ears, feeling phantom vibrations. I'm fine, he managed to choke out. It's just, my hearing is very sensitive. The girl raised an eyebrow at him before noticing his dropped chocolate and picking it up for him. She also took a piece out before handing it back. The nerve of this girl. Izuku managed to get a better look at the girl after he took the chocolate back. She had what looked to be her dark blue school shirt tied around her waist, revealing a purple shirt with the words "Rock On" implanted on it. What caught his attention were her earlobes, which stretched out to her shoulders. The ends looked like headphone jacks. I need to write that in my journal. He watched as she played with her headphone jacks. Really, you got sensitive hearing too? My quirk's all about hearing, and I always make sure the music's loud enough to where it can't hurt me. And trust me, this is nothing. Izuku swallowed, nodding slightly. Now that he thought about it, it was the first time since he met Venom that he'd had to explain it to someone. He had hidden it from his mom the entire time, and he kept quiet in school too. There was some guilt in not telling Momo. Enhanced. He didn't know how to explain Venom's role and his abilities. Nothing he would say would not make him sound insane, but he could tell that the girl with her quirk might be able to understand the basics and struggles of enhanced hearing. Her eyes widened a little, intrigued. Enhanced? How sensitive are we talking here? I can basically hear everything, Izuku said, still massaging his temples. Not just sounds, but I can also hear the tiniest things, heartbeats from blocks away, stuff like that. If I focus hard enough, I can ignore them. Very hard living with it sometimes, especially when it's sudden or overwhelming. Like your music? He shot her a smirk. The girl seamlessly ignored his final comment and just blinked. A heartbeat from a block away? She crossed her arms, the curiosity deepening in her gaze. So, dude, you're basically a walking radar? I can barely hear more than a few feet away. Izuku chuckled. More like a walking headache. I'm currently trying to find some earplugs, but none of the ones I've picked work that well. My hearing helps me sense danger though, even before I see it, so I wouldn't say it's too bad. He said, his gaze lowering discouragingly. The same hand from before stood out in his lowered gaze. The girl looked at him, awaiting his response. Izuku put his hand in hers and firmly shook it. Kyoka Jiro, Kyoka said. Izuku composed himself before replying. Izuku Midoriya. Your quirk's intense, man, Jiro said, her voice quieter now as if instinctively adjusting to his sensitivity, which he greatly appreciated. I get it though. My quirk lets me pick up all kinds of sounds, especially when I use my earphone jacks. But I never thought I would meet anyone with more sensitive hearing than me. Jiro walked back to the park swing set and sat on one of the swings, expecting Izuku to follow. He saw a small speaker on the ground where she sat, presumably what she used to make all that noise. Another girl, huh? You've been getting more popular lately, Izuku. What's next, her number? Venom's voice slithered through his mind, almost like a teasing growl. Izuku did his best to hide the shiver going down his spine. He felt his face flaring up, shifting in his swing to avoid Jiro's gaze. Come on, it's not like that. I'm just making friends. Sure, Izuku. Venom chuckled, his tone almost playful. Just friends. If I'm going to work out to improve the symbiote output, I should also learn to adapt to the passive abilities, right? Jiro's had her hearing quirk for longer than we've known each other, and I think I can learn from her. Izuku took the swing next to hers. Do you often sit out here listening to music? Yeah, but you make that sound like a bad thing. Jiro raised an eyebrow at him. Izuku held his hands out in defense. Sorry, I was trying to make conversation. Relax, Green, I'm just messing around. That uniform. Jiro eyed him from top to bottom. You don't pass around here often? Yeah, I was just passing by on my way home from the store. Just needed to get some things. Jiro scoffed. What's with the journal? You one of those social rejects who studies all the time? Oh shit, she read you like a book. Hitting right on the mark, Izuku flinched and recoiled away in his swing. Well, I just like studying heroes and such. Like quirk analysis and stuff. It's kind of my thing. He laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Ha, so you're the hero nerd type? Jiro remarked, raising an eyebrow as she adjusted her earphone jacks. I assume you got notes on heroes and stuff? Suddenly, his eyes widened and he moved closer to Jiro, ignoring how her face gained a faint blush across it. Yes, exactly. If you wouldn't mind, could I write about you in it? You could be my first entry in this next volume. Ah, you're really passionate about this. Jiro said, her smirk softening into curiosity. My quirk isn't all that though. Now you have him riled up. I wouldn't say that at all. Your quirk is so cool. You said you can plug in your jacks to improve your hearing, which could help with recon. I read that some people get a combination of their parents' quirks. Is that the case for you? Sorry if it's personal. Also, what did you call your quirk? How do you deal with overstimulation with noises? I need tips for myself. Jiro seemed lost in his ramblings, not being able to understand a single word. She held out her hand. Slow down, Green, I can barely keep up. Geez, you really are passionate about this. Izuku shrunk down. Sorry again, I just get excited. There was a pause between the two, an awkward silence lingering between the two until Jiro spoke up. About my parents, my quirk is an exact replica of my mom's except that she can't extend her earlobes like me. It was my dad who helped name my quirk earphone jack. As for the sound sensitivity, I used a pair of costume-made noise-canceling headphones. You said none of the ones you picked worked for you. Why don't you try mine and see how they compare? His eyes landed on the purple and blue headphones resting on her neck. He was amused at how it matched the vibe she was presenting. Unlike regular headphones, these had been designed with small openings on the bottoms, presumable to allow Jiro's earlobes and the jacks attached to them to hang comfortably while she used them. You sure it's fine? Hesitant to touch something personal to her. Jiro shrugged. Go for it. They're custom, but they should help keep the edge off. When he put them on, the world around him dulled, the constant barrage of sounds, the chirping birds, the distant cars, muffled to a bearable hum. For the first time this week, Izuku felt. He exhaled, a smile spreading across his face as the tension in his body melted. Whoa, he whispered. This is amazing. Jiro chuckled, told ya. Feels like heaven, huh, Green? She lightly shoved him with her elbow. Thanks for that, Izuku said, returning the headphones to her. I should start saving up for a pair of my own. Jiro started swaying back and forth on the swing while Izuku continued sketching her page into his journal. So, is your quirk just super hearing or is there anything else? There's that question. Fortunately, Izuku and Venom had developed a good enough backstory for this question. Since Venom didn't count as a quirk, he was technically quirkless, so he had come up with a story that fit in with his abilities. Jiro would be the first person he's told since he is still afraid of how his mother will react. I call it perception, he said, holding his arms out in an X shape for dramatic effect. This is why you don't have any friends. Jiro only stared at his actions for a moment, the awkward silence creeping back in. Then she raised a hand to her lips in an attempt to hide her laugh. Izuku's face went red with embarrassment. As I was saying, my quirk allows me to have enhanced senses: sight, smell, touch, taste, and most recently hearing. Jiro had stopped laughing at this point and looked back at Izuku with what seemed like genuine interest, which made him feel like he needed to explain more. Izuku took a deep breath, his gaze lowering as his hands fidgeted nervously. When I was a kid, the doctors told me I was quirkless. For years I thought they were right, no powers, no abilities. I thought I'd never be a hero. His voice softened, his eyes focusing on the ground as his feet kicked the sand beneath his feet. I'd be dreaming about waking up with the coolest, most heroic quirk that would let me help people. My classmate got lucky in the quirk lottery and managed to get an explosion quirk. Everyone praised him. I tried many things that could awaken it in some way, but in the end I was just me. Jiro watched him, her expression softening. That sucks, dude. Izuku nodded, smiling weakly. Yeah. But then, a few years ago, everything changed. It turns out I wasn't quirkless after all. My quirk was just dormant. I didn't know why at first, but the doctor said my quirk was late to activate. Now it's all coming in at once and I'm still figuring it out. He scratched the back of his neck, glancing up at her nervously. It's been a lot to deal with. Jiro crossed her arms, her curiosity deepening. So all of your senses just woke up one day? Pretty much, Izuku said with a shrug. It was like everything got turned up to 11 overnight. I hear things from miles away, smell things no one else notices, and see details other people miss. It's cool, but it's overwhelming sometimes. That's why the chocolate helps. It keeps me grounded. Jiro's eyebrow quirked up, clearly intrigued. Dude, you're practically a living radar. Did the docs ever say what woke up your quirk? They did actually. Izuku reached into his shopping bag and pulled out a chocolate bar with a missing square piece. Jiro blinked, still looking at the chocolate, confusion evident on her face. So that's what it's for, huh? Izuku smiled, rubbing the back of his neck. It enhances all of my senses. But that uses up a ton of energy. It's like running a marathon every time I focus. Sounds exhausting, Jiro said, taking a piece of chocolate that Izuku handed to her. Jiro took it and ate it bit by bit, whispering, "Thank you." It is at times, Izuku laughed. The doctor said that I needed a compound called phenethylamine. He said it's like fuel that helps my body regulate all of the sensory input. Without it, I get overloaded. Like, the music you were playing earlier could have knocked me out if I hadn't known that I needed chocolate. Jiro stared at the chocolate in her hand, her eyes widening with disbelief. Wait, so from all of the things, chocolate is the thing that keeps you from crashing? Pretty much. Izuku nodded sheepishly. Jiro stared at him for a moment before breaking into a smirk. Damn Green, your quirk just keeps getting weirder. She leaned back on the swing, the chains creaking with each motion. She then leaned back in her swing, tapping her earphone jacks against the metal frame as she thought. You should stop by here more often, Green. I mean, if you need someone to help you get used to your enhanced hearing, I guess I could show you a few things. Izuku blinked, his heart skipping a beat at the offer. Oh, really? You do that? Jiro shrugged, looking away as if it wasn't a big deal. Yeah, why not? You seem like you could use the help. Besides, she shot him a playful smirk, someone's gotta keep you from passing out whenever I turn the volume up. Izuku chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. Thanks, Jiro. That'd be amazing. She kicked at the ground, sending her swing swaying gently again. See you around, Green? Yeah, Izuku nodded, gathering his things with a bright smile. See you around. As Izuku walked away, his smile still lingering, Venom spoke up, careful. Friends just drag you down. Izuku's smile faltered slightly. I know I'm brand new to making friends, but I guarantee you that everyone can make each other better. You can either keep up or stay behind, but I've already made my choice. The symbiote remained silent at his response. And with that, Izuku went on his way. A couple of hours after meeting Jiro, Izuku stood in another empty park, one that was much closer to his house. The lone boy in black gym shorts and a white shirt was pushing himself off the ground of a nearby park. Izuku gritted his teeth in pain and frustration, sweat falling to his eyes as he pushed himself beyond. He shut his eyes as he lowered down again to start another set. Just one more set, he thought, his arms trembling harshly. His arms and legs were screaming for him to stop, but he refused to surrender. If he planned to make it to UA, he needed to get stronger, faster, and tougher. The entrance exams for a bit over a year away. He still had another year of middle school before he could apply, and he was way too far behind everyone else to slack around. He had to be ready. After finishing his last push-up, Izuku drank from his water bottle on the ground. You are holding back too much. If you let me take control, I can make you stronger than anyone else who would try in that school. Venom's voice boomed in his thoughts, his annoyance evident. Why waste your time in pointless exercises? Izuku stood up, his empty water bottle in hand, and exhaled sharply as he stood. He began stretching his sore muscles. We already talked about this, Venom. If I want to become strong enough for UA, I need to put in my effort. I have to get stronger on my own. The symbiote grumbled inside his head, displeased. Foolish, you have potential beyond this. It won't be bad to try. Your training's done for the day, so why not indulge me with this? Izuku paused for a moment, considering his companion's words. Of course, part of him wanted to try out the power that Venom constantly mentioned. He too wanted to tap into that powerful feeling inside him and go rampant for a bit. But he had to control himself. The day he met Venom and watched the news of the people Venom took out showed him two things. First was that he had immense strength and power than any kid would dream of having, and second, if he couldn't control it, other people could end up like those thugs. The people he cared about could get hurt. But despite thinking about all of the bad things that could happen, the temptation was always there. "All right," he said slowly, wiping the sweat off his forehead. "Let's try it out. Just this once." Venom's excitement surged, dark energy crawling through Izuku's veins. "As you wish." Izuku crouched down, preparing to jump. A surge of strength shoots through his body. His muscles bulged slightly, his pupils dilated, causing his sight to sharpen. He could feel the ground beneath his feet in a way he had never felt before, every tiny shift in the air, each imperfection in the dirt. This was it. "Now jump," Venom urged, eager. Izuku took a deep breath and lowered himself. He shot himself upward with everything he had. His legs pushed harder than he could even imagine. But at the peak of his jump, something snapped. Arg! His leg twisted at an unnatural angle as he felt a sharp, searing pain shoot through his calf and into his thigh. He stumbled, crashing into the dirt, clutching his leg in agony. His vision blurred as the pain overwhelmed him. Venom's voice, now softer but with a hint of dark satisfaction, echoed through his mind. "This is what happens when you resist. But don't worry, I'll fix this. This is what happens when I'm not strong enough," Izuku managed to say, biting down hard. Izuku gasped at a strange, cold, crawling sensation in his injured leg. The pain was unbearable, but then it began to fade. Venom's dark tendrils seeped from his skin and wrapped around the broken bone. Izuku watched, stunned, as the injury began to heal rapidly. The twisted joint snapped back into place and the torn muscle knit itself together. "What did I say? Good as new, you would be unstoppable." Venom's voice seeped with confidence. As Izuku's leg returned to normal, the pain now completely gone. Izuku slowly and cautiously got up on his feet, making sure not to provoke any other injuries. He leaned to the side of the previously broken leg to test his weight on it. It felt perfect, as if his leg had never been broken in the first place. He looked down at his hands, which were trembling, still in shock from the injury and the power that pumped through his veins. He exhaled sharply, his heart pounding. "That was reckless. This just shows me that I need to get stronger so that I'm not useless on the field. Nothing can hurt us. It doesn't matter if I can heal, it's all for nothing if I can't handle my own." The symbiote remained quiet. Izuku gathered his things and went home, the sun setting in the distance. He checked his phone and read that it was nearly 6 p.m. He also had a few missed messages from Momo that made his tummy all fuzzy and warm. To be completely honest, the power fascinated him, but he knew he wouldn't use it until he was ready. If he was going to do this, he would have to work harder than anyone else. After a warm shower and a balanced dinner from his mom, Izuku was slumped on the living room couch, reading through his messages. Momo had been sending him messages asking about his day, a few about his hobbies and interests, and a few more about studies and school. Before Izuku could finish reading them, his phone started vibrating and a tune began playing. On the top of the screen, Izuku read the name Momo and a red and green button. He froze on the spot, unsure of what to do next. "Momo is calling me? What do I do?" His heart was beating almost as hard as when he was training. He had to answer before the tone ended, so without a plan he pressed the green button and held the phone to his ear. Hello," he stuttered. "Izuku. Hey, how are you?" Momo responded, her voice like honey. His super hearing didn't bother him one bit when Momo was talking. "Oh, I'm doing good. I saw that you didn't read my messages until now. I decided to call you instead." "Oh, why, sorry. I was training." Izuku didn't know why, but he felt a bit smug saying that to a girl. "Anyways, what's up? You were training too?" "I'm not surprised. When we met, you gave me the impression that you were a very diligent person. I also train when I can. You can never be too ready for the entrance exam." No one was there to notice the red flare covering Izuku's face at Momo's unexpected compliment. I do what I can. Everyone else is probably further ahead than me, so I need to work twice. No, thrice as hard as everybody else. The only other problem is the academic part. Is it true that the entrance exam isn't only a written test but also a fighting test? I believe the correct word is a practical exam. My parents are partnered with UA and I sometimes get to accompany them when they attend a business meeting, though I'm not allowed to know any more than that. Whoa, you've actually been to UA? I thought it was closed off to the public. I'm so jealous, you've got to tell me all about it. His nerdy side outshined his shy demeanor. Izuku had slid to the edge of the couch, leaning forward as if it would help him hear any better. Unknowingly to him, his mother had walked in and was eating at the dining table. Izuku was close enough to her that she could hear him on the phone. She hadn't interrogated Izuku much about who he was talking to since she hadn't seen him smile in so long. Momo giggled over the phone, causing Izuku's heart to beat faster. Sure thing. Although, now may not be the best time for me to tell you everything. If you'd like, we can assign another meetup. Izuku could hardly breathe. He was sure Momo could hear his heart racing through the phone. He tried to focus on her words, but his mind was still whirling from the idea of her inviting him to meet again. Another meetup? Izuku stammered, already imagining how it would play out. Yes, Momo replied, sounding as composed and elegant as she always did. My parents are hosting a small gathering this weekend, just a few business partners and some close acquaintances. If you're interested, you could come over to my house before the event. We could study together, maybe we could review training routines. I'd also love to get your insights on hero analysis. Izuku's mind went blank for a moment. Study? At Momo's house. He felt his face growing hotter. Was she asking him to come over to study? What would her parents think about it? Does she know what this may look like to everyone else? He swallowed hard. A study at your place? I'd be delighted. That would be really awesome. He winced at how awkwardly he phrased that, also because his voice cracked. I'm sure I'd learn a lot from you. Momo's soft laugh returned, making his shoulders loosen. I'm sure I'd learn just as much from you. It's a date then. A D-date? Izuku nearly dropped his phone, his voice cracking in shock. That sounds great. Just let me know when. He did his best to sound serious but failed miserably. Momo giggled again. I'll send you the details. We can meet tomorrow if that's all right with you. My parents are really kind and are interested in meeting you. Izuku barely managed to process her words. God, this girl's going to be the death of me. He was still processing the mention of her parents, too caught up in the fact that he was still going to her house soon. Afterward, the conversation took a more casual turn as they continued discussing their hobbies and passions. Izuku talked about his favorite heroes and Momo talked about the recent books she had picked up. Still, the looming reality that he would meet up with her family kept Izuku on edge. After the call ended, Izuku sunk into the couch, staring at the ceiling in disbelief. He didn't even realize that he couldn't stop smiling. His mom came into view with a smirk on her face. Izuku, honey, who was that? Startled, Izuku rambled his words. Oh, Jay, just a friend who wanted to study together. His mom's smile widened. A friend, huh? She paused, then teasingly asked, should I prepare something special if you invite this friend over? Izuku's face flushed as he shook his head violently. No need, Mom. It's not like that. At least I don't think so. The next day, Izuku had woken up earlier to get a few laps in. He didn't do his usual routine as he wanted to save his energy for later. Momo had sent him her address. He wasn't surprised at how far away she lived. He thought back to when they met in the tea shop. She had said that it was her first time there. This time he had planned and had his outfit prepared for the day. He also had a train ticket that would get him there without needing to run on the train tracks. His mom had also helped a bit by helping him comb his hair and clean his face. Izuku thought it was a bit weird, but his mom insisted that it was necessary for first impressions. A few hours later, he was on the train to her house, his heart pounding in sheer nerves. He couldn't start sweating before meeting her, so he tried to find ways to distract himself. He was looking at videos on his voice. It was good practice since he had never had a phone without buttons. You've been surprisingly quiet, Izuku said, looking up. There isn't much to say right now, Izuku. I felt the same things you felt when you spoke to the girl. Your stubbornness is annoying, but I'm willing to let this play out your way. Venom answered. His usual dark voice seemed calm and toned down. That's surprisingly nice of you. I know yesterday's training went south for us both, but you need to know that things don't work out if we just eat and kill people. Izuku did his best Venom impression. I'm not sure if I should tell Momo about you, or rather about perception. What do you think? Venom grumbled. It was bad enough that you told the earlobe girl, but even I know when someone is worth trusting. Whoa, I never knew you could trust people. Izuku smiled. It's weird. I am capable of trusting. I have been trusting you enough to not take over and ravage the entire bus right now. Your idea with the chocolate worked out, so I'll give you that. Izuku's eyelids relaxed a bit as he got comfortable in his train seat, not focusing on the stranger staring at him for speaking to himself. Once I get stronger, we'll be able to use more power to help people. He held his hand out in pride. Izuku stood before the giant shiny gate, far grander than anything he'd ever seen. The walls connected to the gate appeared rigid and reinforced. His hands fidgeted on the strap of his gym bag, intimidated by the towering iron gates. Does everyone but you have a house like this? I might have to start reconsidering my host options. Venom joked, causing Izuku to jolt in surprise. Once he composed himself, he held his phone in his hand. This is expected from a Yaoyorozu, they're like the richest family in Japan. Though this looks more like a private neighborhood than a house. It's good that we came earlier than since we might have to search for her mansion. He was glad that he came with an extra change of clothes in case he got sweaty before the training even started. His nose twitched at the pleasant smell of the lush green hedges surrounding the gate. These people sure take good care of their plants. I could get used to this smell. There was a fancy call box to the side of the gate, Izuku figured. It was the only way to get it. He knew Venom would just have them jump over the gate. He pushed the button and the box made a loud buzz. There was no answer for a minute before he thought about trying again. Again there was no answer. Is this the right place? I don't think I can make it anywhere else in time. Maybe one last time. On the third press, someone on the speaker spoke up before his finger could move away from the button. Izuku. I apologize, I didn't think you would be here so soon. He recognized that voice, but the tone was new. Momo? Is that you? He asked, focusing his hearing. The speaker picked up the noise from the other side. Momo sounded like she was in a rush. I'll open the gate for you right now and have someone pick you very soon. Then the speaker buzzed again, indicating that the line had ended. What was that all of dash? The gate creaked open with a hum, revealing the long pathway to the entrance. Izuku stepped onto the cobble path and continued walking, stopping at a fountain. It was so ordained that even Venom had to give a grunt of approval. Walking through the gate had a heavy atmosphere to it, different from being behind it. It was much simpler when he was outside. Now the weight of the situation was crushing him. Despite what he had talked about with Momo, he knew this wouldn't be just a simple study session. It felt more significant. Her parents wanted to meet him. They were probably more important and powerful people. He hadn't moved past the water fountain, finding comfort in the water's noise. Just, don't mess this up, Izuku Midoriya. First impressions matter. Unexpectedly, his companion spoke out words of reassuring. Relax, Izuku. You're acting as if this is a villain's lair. You saved the girl's life, and from what I've learned from your TV, is that parents care a lot about their kids. Connect the dots, there's no possibility that they'll want to harm you. Venom grumbled, if you ask me, the girl seems fond of you. That's not helping. Izuku hissed back. He caught a sound that was like an electric motor. Eventually, a small driverless vehicle pulled around the fountain and stopped beside him. Hello. It wasn't as big as a car, but it wasn't as small as a motorcycle. It looked to only fit one person. Please enter the vehicle. It spoke out, opening its trunk for his gym bag. It was something out of a sci-fi movie that he wanted to study more, but Venom insisted that they get going. Izuku wrapped his seatbelt over himself and shut the door. Then the vehicle started moving. It was astounding how quiet it was. He had only seen these types of cars in videos. The trip lasted about 5 minutes. Izuku took pleasure in looking at the view. The serene gardens and gold-like fountains had him only saying whoa and ah. Eventually, in the distance, a large building came into view. He presumed it was her mansion. It was by far the largest thing he'd ever seen. It was also the grander thing ever. The vehicle made a beep when it parked, the door and trunk opening on their own. As he stepped out, his eyes lowered to the final obstacle between him and the mansion, a huge golden double door. As he got closer, his heartbeat got stronger. I'll admit, your world is not as ugly as I thought. Venom commented, a hint of amusement in his voice. Before he could knock, the giant double doors opened. He began controlling his breathing, preparing himself for what was to come. Man, this is more terrifying than fighting. Stop shaking your legs too much. Here, I'll hold them in place. The symbiote said. Thank you, he whispered, the grip on his gym bag tightening. Out of everything else he had seen today, what broke him was the first person he saw on the other side. Standing there, looking as graceful as ever, was Momo. Izuku. You made it. Momo greeted him with a radiant smile that nearly blinded him, yet it instantly put him at ease. She was wearing a casual yet elegant outfit that made him feel out of place. It was nothing too formal, but she looked like she belonged on the front page of a magazine. Come on in, my parents are inside eager to meet you. Right, he managed to say, trying to remember how to walk. Why, your houses are really amazing, Momo. Thanks for inviting me. Momo giggled again. She got a good hold of his hand. You don't have to be so nervous. My parents are quite welcoming, I promise. I believe that, but it doesn't mean they aren't intimidating. As Momo led him inside the house hand to hand, Izuku couldn't help but marvel at the lavish interior. The grand chandelier hanging from the ceiling, the polished marble floors, and the intricately designed furniture were all so overwhelming. Despite all of the luxurious surroundings, Momo's warmth made the environment feel less intimidating. She seemed so down to earth even in a place like this. A few of the servants greeted them as they entered. Izuku picked up that they were very courteous to Momo, but their glare switched when they looked at him. He swore that a few had a killing intent, especially since they were holding hands. Soon they entered what looked like the living room. That room alone was larger than his entire house. Two well-dressed adults stood, their presence demanding attention. He instantly recognized Momo's parents. Momo's mother, elegant and poised, wore a kind smile, while her father, tall and imposing, studied Izuku with a curious yet calm gaze. Momo's father's gaze lingered a bit too long on Izuku, more than he would have liked. Silence hung in the air as Izuku's heartbeat quickened, his sweaty palms gripping the strap of his gym bag. Momo was the one who broke the silence. Izuku, these are my parents. Momo introduced them with her usual grace. Mother, father, this is my friend Izuku Midoriya. He is here to study and train with me. Izuku bowed deeply, his hand still connected to Momo's, his voice was shaky but polite. It's an honor to meet you, Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu. Thank you for allowing me into your beautiful home. Momo's mother smiled warmly, it was the same smile that Momo had. The pleasure is ours, Izuku. Momo speaks very highly of you. She is very joyful when speaking about you. Mother. Momo spoke up, a faint blush on her face. Her mother laughed at her daughter's reaction. Izuku wasn't sure if he could laugh. Then it was her father's turn to speak. His black hair was the same color tone as Momo's. From what Momo tells us, you are very astute and disciplined, Momo's father said, his voice even but with an underlying weight to it. However, understand that our expectations are high. My daughter is aiming for you. Make sure that your presence here doesn't distract her from that path. Izuku stood up straight, a mix of relief and anxiety. Why, yes sir, I'll do my best. Sir. Momo continued speaking with her parents for a bit. Izuku made sure to stay quiet unless he was spoken to. Momo, please show Izuku to the study room, or if you'd rather train first, you may use one of our gyms. One of? Momo only smiled and pulled Izuku along. He tried to wave goodbye to her parents, but they were out of view before he could. As he followed Momo out of the room, Izuku couldn't help but compare her parents. Her mother's warm smile reminded her of Momo's, which calmed him a bit, but her father's presence still weighed on him. He was nothing like his mother, who was warm and overbearing in her concern. Mr. Yaoyorozu seemed like a man who analyzed him the moment he came in. If he wanted to make it out alive, he would make sure that his actions met the expectations of her father. Momo glanced at Izuku, his face pensive. She made sure they were out of sight before she spoke up. Izuku, don't feel intimidated by my parents. My father is very charming but isn't the best when it comes to talking to younger people. He's doing his best. Izuku could only smile. Momo squeezed his hand. Which would you prefer to do first, Izuku? Momo asked. Should we review my study plan for the entrance exam, or would you like to start with our basic training? Izuku noticed that they had reached a fork in the road. To their left, his sight had zoomed into the gym, and to his left, her could see a fancy table with books and study pamphlets. Gym. Let's show her what we're capable of. Venom urged, his voice was dark and eager. Izuku couldn't deny that his muscles were sore from yesterday, but again the thought of training in an actual professional gym. He just couldn't pass it up. I think we should try our training first. If that's okay with you? He smiled at her. Momo, her eyes sparkling, clasped his hand with both of hers. Of course, let me take you there. Izuku waited on the bench in the spacious gym. There were many workout machines surrounding a training mat in the center. Izuku didn't recognize most of the machines. He switched into his green training shirt and blue shorts. After Momo led him to the gym, she left for the girls' changing room to change. She came out a few minutes later, and Izuku nearly passed out at her outfit. While Izuku wore a basic gym outfit, Momo walked out with a black crop top and red skin-tight leggings. Her hair was also tied in her usual spiky bun. He did his best not to stare too much as she bounced with each step. Although she looked gorgeous in every dress she wore, Izuku had to admit that her hourglass figure looked amazing in her current clothes. Stop yourself, you must control yourself. He pinched his wrist, trying to snap out. Sorry to keep you waiting, Izuku. She leaned down at him before helping him up. I should explain to you my quirk before we begin. Izuku perked up. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask you about it in the tea shop but it didn't feel like it was the right time. I appreciate your consideration. They stepped into the training mat. Momo stood across from him, proud yet modest. My quirk is called creation. It allows me to use my body's lipids to create anything from any part of my body. I can create anything no matter how big and complex it may be as long as I know the atomic configuration of it. Izuku felt his brain short-circuit at her explanation. Her quirk fits her intelligence. Izuku could never imagine being able to remember any atomic formulas or whatever they were called. That's insane. Momo looked confused at his comment. I'm sorry? He straightened up, realizing how blunt he sounded, his hands waving in panic. Oh no. I meant that as a good thing. Your quirk is so cool and complex yet you make it sound like you have a perfect handle of it. I could never possibly memorize any of those configuration thingies. You are amazing. His eyes shined with excitement, leaning back and forth on his heels. Momo blushed slightly, her hand brushing the stray lock of hair as she looked away. Thank you for your compliment, Izuku. I'm sure I still have a long way to go if I want to become a pro, but your words encourage me. I am sure you can also become a hero with or without quirk. Izuku stopped bouncing, his gaze lowered to the mat. Venom, I think I should tell her. Venom slid into his mind. We better stick to the same story you told Earlobes. He said bluntly, don't get too carried away. Izuku took a deep breath and nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. Momo, there's something I need to tell you, he started, his voice wavering. It wasn't like telling Jiro. Somehow this felt different. More important. I don't want you to think I've been lying to you, but I also haven't told you the full story. Momo straightened, facing him, her warm gaze studying his face. I see. It's okay, Izuku. Whatever it is, I'm sure you had a good reason to not tell me sooner. Damn, she looks great even when she's serious. Focus. Alright? Izuku spent the next few minutes retelling the story he had told Jiro at the park. He refined a few details and explained any of the questions that could come up, ensuring he didn't talk for too long. He was picking up on any sudden twitch or crease in Momo's expression, trying to get a read on her which he was finding quite difficult. Once he was finished, Momo's silence made him nervous. He already couldn't read her expression, but the fact that after spilling what might be a big change in his life, she just stood there, a hand to her chin pensively. Your quirk manifested when you saved me? Momo's eyes widened briefly before softening into a smile. That's quite the surprise. I can't imagine what you've been through with this sudden change. It must be overwhelming. We don't have to train if you don't feel comfortable. We could just start with the academics. Huh? No, I want to train with you. I'm going to have to go beyond if I want to catch up with you. Izuku stated. But why, you're not mad that I hid this from you? Momo raised an eyebrow. No? Your quirk manifested the day you saved me. It's expected that you would not know anything about it. I can't find a reason to be upset. In fact, I'm rather happy for you. You got what you wished for. She's being too nice about this. Venom's voice slithered through his thoughts. I almost thought she would interrogate you. Thanks for understanding, Izuku said, letting out a breath he didn't realize he was holding. It felt like a weight had been lifted from his chest now that he had shared his secret with her. But before he could process it fully, Momo shifted the conversation back to training. Should we get started now? She asked, her left hand glowing with a colorful aura, and then a staff grew out of her palm. She moved it around with skill and finesse, possibly as a way to intimidate him, which was working fairly well. Do you have a preference for a weapon? I could make it for you if you'd like. Izuku took on a fighting stance, one that he had seen many times on TV and in manga. This is my first time sparring with someone. I've never used a weapon before. Is a staff the only one you know how to use? No, but it is the one I exceed at. I was also taught how to use nunchucks and a few swords. Momo's eyes shined with a bit of pride, her chest puffed up. How am I supposed to go up against you? He shrieked in fear. You have me, damn it. Momo set down the staff and took on her fighting stance, facing Izuku. We should start with the basics. I'll do my best to teach you what I know so that you can learn. If I am going too fast for you, please let me know so that we can adjust our routine. Are you ready? Her eyes narrowed like a warrior. Izuku stood in his fighting stance, his arms shaking ever so slightly. I'm ready, he called out, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Venom urged him to strike first, but his legs felt rooted to the ground. He could hear Momo's sharp breath as she prepared to move, but still, he hesitated. Then, like a blur, she was upon him, delivering a swift roundhouse kick, tossing him out of the training mat and into a dumbbell rack. It was then that Izuku knew it would be a long morning. Izuku groaned lightly as he placed the ice on his face. His and Momo's training went without a hitch. Now he sat in a large ornate room. It took his eyes a while to focus since everything reflected light too well. There was a large golden chandelier on the ceiling. His notes and pen rested on the polished wooden table. After they had changed out of their training clothes, Momo had a servant guide Izuku to the room she had prepared for them. There was a rotating whiteboard with what appeared to be a study plan written in Momo's flawless handwriting. Izuku also noticed the stack of books set further down the table. Some of its titles he could understand or at least grasp what they were about, but others he didn't even know existed. He made sure to silence his phone so it didn't interrupt or distract him. It was almost 2 in the afternoon. His body still ached, but the smell of tea wafting through the room was enough to distract him from the pain. There was a soft knock on the door and then it opened slowly. A white serving cart strolled into the room, filled to the brim with teacups and a bigger tea kettle. He could smell the pleasant minty freshness from his seat. It was strong enough to have made him forget about his injuries. What he wasn't prepared for was what came next as a young girl with onyx eyes strolled in behind the cart. The girl wore a red polo shirt that fell to her waist, the white shorts showing off her well-toned legs, which were difficult to look away from. Unlike Izuku, whose entire body was covered in bruises, Momo remained unperturbed. "Sorry for the wait, I wanted to make sure we had our favorite teas prepared for this session." What's wrong?" Momo had introduced herself to him again, but he was still recovering from her and her outfit. She must have noticed his gaping mouth to assume she made a mistake. "Oh, and nothing, sorry. You really went all out for this. Do I smell imperial golden tips?" he asked, trying to change the subject and regain his composure. Right on cue, Momo's eyes lit up, sparkling with excitement. "Yes. I'm so glad you noticed. My parents managed to get more. And since it's our favorite tea, I thought it would be nice if we could share some of it while we studied." She beamed, her enthusiasm contagious as she poured each of them a cup. Izuku felt a warm glow in his chest, and despite the lingering pain from the sparring match, he happily accepted the cup. "Thanks, Momo. You're a really thoughtful person." He gulped the tea down, the warmth relaxing his sore muscles. After serving the tea, Momo prepared the whiteboard and books for them. Izuku flinched when he saw that she sat down directly beside him. He tried not to make a big deal out of it, but his shivering hand could barely hold the tea. His grades were the worst to be fair, but they also weren't the best. Since he was the only kid without a quirk, he was a major practice dummy for everyone else, including the teachers. Even when Izuku thought he had the hang of a subject, his grades didn't get any better. It was as if his scores were being altered. His mom would have to buy him so many uniforms to replace the ones that were ruined. He never admitted to the harassment, but he should have known he couldn't hide it from his mom. When she did complain to the school, she received a half-assed apology and a scripted apology, claiming that they would do better. Of course, nothing would change. He did his best to follow Momo's teaching. It was much easier to understand, and she helped him put his knowledge into practice. After a few exercises, they decided to take another tea break. "By the way, your dad said you're aiming for UA. How do the entrance exams work?" "I'll try my best to explain since I'm not allowed to know everything in full detail. The exam will take place on February 26th and consists of both a written and practical exam, with the latter being regarded as more important," she stated, holding up her index finger. "After taking both exams, we await a week for the results to come in the mail. If we are rejected, then there isn't much we can do. If we are accepted, we'll have to fill out forms regarding our clothing size and measurements." Izuku spoke up. "That sounds like a lot. But you don't seem too worried about it. Yet again, you're probably the only middle schooler who can read these high school level books. I wonder if I'll be good enough. UA is for the best of the best, and I started with a huge handicap." He sounded exhausted as the information crammed in his head. He felt a soft shoulder nudge his side. He winced lightly. "Izuku, we've only known one another for a few weeks, and you have shown me that if anyone deserves to be in UA, it's you. You awoke your quirk years after everyone else, yet instead of brooding with hopelessness, you stay persistent in your goal and are willing to work for it. You have shown me so today, both in our sparring and right now as we study." Momo's hand rested on his shoulder. It was hard for him to maintain eye contact when she had a sincere look. "I agree," Venom whispered. "You worry too much, Izuku." Well, it's only because I have such a great teacher. You are too kind." Momo put her hand over his as they lost track of time in their notes. The two kids went off studying for another hour, with one of them telling a story or joke here and there. There was another soft knock on the door that caused the two to jump. A servant poked his head into the room, whispering, "Ms. Yaoyorozu, it's almost time. I was asked to come and get you." He waved his hand. Izuku glanced at his phone and saw that it was nearing 4 now. His train home wasn't going to pass for a long time, so he planned to stay at a nearby cafe while waiting for the train. Momo didn't look too pleased at the news. Maybe this gathering was for something boring? Well, Izuku didn't go to enough gatherings to know which ones were boring. He started packing his notes in the side pocket of his gym bag when Momo grabbed his hand again. "Are you packing up so soon?" Something about her voice made him feel a certain way. Well, your dad explained how important the gathering was, so I thought that I should head out before the first guest arrives. Wouldn't want them seeing me in this clothes." The heiress frowned. "You said your train home will be here in a few hours. Where will you stay in the meantime?" Izuku pulled out his phone and looked up a picture of the cafe he had in mind. It wasn't a well-known location, but its reviews spoke for themselves. "There's this cafe near the station. I thought I could wait there." "Absolutely not. It's dangerous out there and it would put you at risk of an assault. You should stay for the gathering." She held her hand over her chest, using her gaze to enchant him. That doesn't sound like a good idea. There's going to be many important people here, right?" Izuku muttered. "Business partners, CEOs, investors. I don't even know what rich people talk about. Plus, I don't even have formal clothes. There's going to be too many fancy people and I don't know what fancy people talk about. Plus, I don't have any formal clothes on me." "That won't be an issue." Momo turned to the servant. "Please take my friend and get his measurements. Provide him with the best clothes we have." The servant nodded, awaiting for Izuku to follow. Wait, you don't have to do this. I don't think I'll be able to pay it back if I ruin it." Momo pushed him out of the room, encouraging him to go on. "I'll come get you when it's time." She smiled. "This is so weird. I didn't plan for this. She is very persistent in spending time with you. If you aren't seeing the signs, then you are lost." "'Cause," Venom joked. "What are you seeing that I'm not?" Izuku was sent to a room where a few more servants awaited him. The room had racks upon racks of rich fabrics and materials. There was a row of sewing machines lined across the room. The servants removed his gym bag and jacket from him and had him stand in front of the mirror. "Which style do you prefer?" a servant with a clipboard asked. "I don't know. Do you prefer a peak lapel or notch lapel?" "Do you have a color scheme or fabric in mind? Looking for something bold or more subtle?" Oh, subtle for sure, please." "How do you prefer your garments to fit? Tailored and snug, relaxed, or something in between? And not too tight. What kind of break do you want in your trousers?" "B break." "No, I don't want any holes in my pants." "Are you leaning for a half canvas or full canvas construction?" Izuku stared blankly, not knowing anything that the man had asked him. All he could do was laugh nervously. As the servants buzzed here and there, adjusting this and that, Izuku couldn't help but feel like a mannequin in a display window. The questions they asked might have been in another language. He never thought that so much would be put into formal wear. It wasn't like he ever expected himself to wear any. Despite having zero knowledge of suit tailoring, he noted how focused the servants were. They moved around him precisely as though they were artists sculpting a masterpiece. Each measurement taken with care, each fabric draped carefully over him before being whisked away for final adjustments. The least he could do was follow their instructions and stand still. An hour later, Izuku stood by the door. Momo's servants had worked long and hard to make him a decent enough suit to wear, but with such a short time to complete it, there were bound to be flaws. The suit was tight around his armpits and back, and his neck was itching from the collar. They had left him back in the same room they had studied in. Now he waited for Momo to get him. That felt weird to think. I'll never get how people can wear this for hours upon hours, much less have a collection of these. Izuku messed around with the collar by stretching it to find a comfortable feeling. Humans take pleasure in wearing uncomfortable clothes. Is it a competition to see who can wear it the longest? He chuckled. If that were the case, then I'd be dead last. But what's really bothering me is this. Tie. Izuku's ears twitched slightly, picking up on the sound of heels getting closer. He sniffed lightly and recognized that ever-so-pleasant scent. Izuku, it's time. Are you ready? He met her in the hallway, still fiddling with the too-tight collar of the suit. The itchiness temporarily went away when his eyes landed on her figure. Stunning was the best word for her. The red dress suited her perfectly, a combination of elegant and simple. The green ribbon? Was that for him? No, I'm probably overthinking that part. Her skirt flares gently, allowing for graceful movement. Her accessories are minimal, pearl stud earrings and a simple bracelet with a green gem in the center. Is that too formal? Is too formal even a thing for these types of gatherings? What do I even say if someone asks why I'm here? What do rich people even talk about here? On her feet, she wears elegant heels and a soft beige with a tiny green bow accent. Her hair is styled like when they went out together, flowing down to her mid-back. Her makeup was natural, enhancing her youthful charm. Oh wow, oh wow. Izuku managed, unable to breathe. He hadn't noticed her walking closer, only stopping when she was inches away. I guess I don't need to ask for your opinion on my attire, but what do you think about my necklace? She posed, putting focus on the accessory on her necklace. It took Venom shocking him to get him out of his daze. Oh, you are amazing. It looks great. He went rigid, heating up in his suit. His hands fidgeted at his side, suffering in the awkward silence. So, what's this gathering gonna be like? What do people talk about at these things? He asked, breaking the silence. If it's fine with you, I'd rather just sit in a corner. Big meetups aren't really my thing. Especially since this one involves rich people. He muttered the last part, hoping she wouldn't hear. Are you sure? I thought it would finally be enjoyable with you here. But maybe you wouldn't enjoy it, she said, the cheer in her voice fading as she fiddled with the green ribbon on her waist. People my age only come up to me because of my family name, or with the intent of getting something from me. For the sake of my parents, I try to be polite, but it's tiring. I don't know what's worse, being treated like a walking source of wealth and power, or them thinking that I'm foolish enough to fall for their attempts. People my age only come up to me because of my family name. Izuku listened quietly, watching the way her fingers twisted in the green ribbon. He never imagined that Momo felt that way. It angered him more that he didn't notice sooner. Momo always seemed composed and confident, someone unstoppable. Hearing her frustration made him realize just how heavy the weight of her must be. She's nothing like most of the rich kids I've heard about. Izuku didn't have anything to say again. It frustrated him that he often found himself not knowing what to say. But if that's what you want, I understand. My parents were pleased to hear that you would be staying for the gathering, but they asked me to let you know that they wish to have a word with you in private sometime this afternoon. I wouldn't worry if I were you. Oh no. Oh shit. What? Izuku's stomach dropped. A private talk with her parents? Much worse, Yoris. He shivered in the suit at the thought of Momo's father towering over him. Just what we needed. Venom stated with annoyance. Another round of judgment from people who only see you as nothing more than an awkward kid. We can't say that about her parents. Plus, I might have an idea of what they'd want to talk about. What do you owe? That clears it up. You're on your own with this one. That's what you say every time something involving people comes up. Again, you shouldn't worry. Momo placed a hand on her shoulder and showed him the way to the main hall. An hour later, many fancy cars and sports cars were filling up, with each one delivering a pompous person. Izuku watched from a window, the pit in his stomach getting deeper with each car he saw. It didn't help that the suit he had on was burning him up, causing him to sweat profusely. Momo had to meet up with her parents at the entrance to greet the guests and help them settle in, so for now he sat while eating chocolate. So many people. Ah geez. It was difficult for him to hold his tea due to his shivering hand. Deep breaths, Izuku. You need to make me look good, so don't get a single drop on that suit. Venom said, trying to lighten the mood. Are we just going to stay here ogling people, or are we going to fight our way to the top? Stay here. In my comfortable seat. With this tea and chocolate. He bluntly answered, not hesitating one bit. BFF like hell we are. I smell meat, up we go. Wait. My legs. Izuku's legs felt numb as he abruptly stood up, getting a few glances from the people already in the hall. All he could do was give them a weak smile. Venom had made him slash the stand-up. His legs were moving awkwardly, almost robotically. Thankfully he had put down the tea and chocolate. He didn't want to imagine what would happen if he bumped into anyone here, even worse, getting them dirty. Okay, fine. I'll get us some food, but let me walk, he muttered, a hand on a wall to support himself. He got goosebumps as Venom renounced control of his legs. As he was composing himself, a tall, curvaceous woman with dark purple hair walked up to him, a drink in her hand. His nose scrunched up at the smell, definitely alcohol. Her hair was styled into bangs, covering one of her sky-blue eyes. Her gray sleek dress complemented her figure, and surprisingly, her red glasses did the same thing too. She looked down at him with a wide, playful grin. You don't look old enough to drink, but if you're honest with me, I can keep a secret, she winked. Izuku yelped, sorry? I'm just going to get some food. Please excuse him, his path was blocked by the woman's hand. She slowly pinned him to the wall, her tongue came out of her mouth to lick her lips, her predatory gaze scanning him from top to bottom. Her other hand cupped his chin. What's going on, miss? Not my idea of meat, but hey, at least you won't be going home without getting something tonight, kid. But you just keep surprising me. Stop that. The lady smiled down at him. Green hair. Cute frickless. Short but admirable. I found you, Izuku Midoriya. That voice. I can't be. Why is she here? Why you're midnight? He stammered. Why hadn't this possibility come to mind? Many pro-heroes could be here too. Momo's parents help with the funding of their support items. Before he could ask for her autograph, Midnight shushed his lips with her finger, making him blush. You can call me Nemuri, dear. After all, we're practically family here, considering how fond of you my niece is. Izuku's brain short-circuited at her words. That woman. Both dangerous and strong. You've picked yourself some excellent meat. Quit the whole meat talk, please. After he calmed down, he faced Nemuri. You mentioned your niece, ma'am, but I don't think I've met her. Nemuri didn't say anything but instead shifted his eyes to the beautiful tall girl with black hair standing by the entrance. Connecting the dots in his head, his face lit up in surprise. You're Momo's aunt? How did I not know about this? It was hard to imagine that Momo, the brilliant and kind, was related to the R-rated hero. Nemuri laughed at his antics. She didn't deny him his autograph when he offered her his hero journal. His notes were organized and rather impressive. There were ideas for moves that she hadn't even thought about. She also couldn't help but laugh at the small side notes he had written, especially the one saying very attractive. Say, Izuku, do you plan on attending UA with Momo? I heard she's been focusing a lot on her studies and training, but I'm still surprised my brother's letting her do it. Her tone changed to a more casual one as she pulled Izuku into a seat, her drink still in hand. I'm still on the fence about it, he said. My quirk isn't all that flashy yet. I'm a late bloomer after all. Nemuri listened closely, moving her arm around his shoulder with care. A late bloomer, huh? You don't say many of those these days, she said, taking a sip from her drink. But from the way Momo spoke of you, she had a lot of admiration towards you. She talks quite a lot about you actually, Nemuri said, her voice turning into a teasing whisper. She's very fond of you and I can see why. If you'd like, I could show you a few tricks in private for her. If you show confidence, then she'll become good prey. Steam shot out of Izuku's ears, nearing his limit. I don't. Nemuri couldn't hold her laughter, pulling Izuku into a side hug. It's really fun to tease you, Izuku. Izuku's eyes widened slightly. Does Momo really talk about me? He shrunk down in her arms. Nemuri took this as a sign that she should hold back the teasing for a moment. Izuku's cheeks were steaming red, she saw him getting a few glances at her niece. The way he looked at her told her everything she needed to know. The arm around Izuku tightened with tenderness. Izuku didn't notice himself leaning toward her. Nemuri's teasing smile faltered for just a moment and morphed into a more genuine one. Her gaze softened as she put down her glass. She doesn't stop talking about how you saved her life. I'm ashamed of myself for not being there for her. Nemuri touched her cheek. I remember the day she told me she wanted to be a hero. It was the first time she looked so determined to do something. You see, my niece is a gifted child. Anything she puts her mind to, she gets it done perfectly and with ease. She has the potential to be one of the greatest leaders, but her lack of experience with working with others holds her back. I didn't know how to help her. I still don't know how to. But when my brother called me about Momo getting assaulted, it was like a wake-up call. There's only a bit over a year left for you two to take the entrance exams. Nemuri's tone slightly hardened, and in such a short time, you've managed to help Momo more than I ever could as her aunt. I owe you for saving her life that day and even more for becoming her first friend. She patted his back. This feels nice and warm. Nemuri. Momo's aunt is so nice. One thing he could find similar in Momo and her aunt was that they were nothing like what their titles deemed them to be. Momo is the rich child who is kind and considerate, and Nemuri is the seductive hero who is tender and perceptive. Their talk shifted to happier topics. Izuku continued to fanboy to her, with Nemuri answering any questions he had. Nemuri also told him a few stories about Momo from when she was little. She even showed him a couple of baby pictures. Nemuri had taken his phone and put her number in it, saying that if he ever needed help with anything, she was there and that she would completely support his and Momo's journey to becoming the best of heroes. Their conversation was cut short when the music started to play. Izuku noticed that men and women were pairing up, hand in hand. The slow music guided their steps as they danced. Does this always happen? Is there someone you're going to dance with? Not unless you're offering. I wouldn't mind dancing with someone so young. She ruffled his hair with her knuckle, winking at him. And no thanks, sorry. I've never danced before, but I am surprised that you don't. Have someone yet? He tried his best to not sound rude. I'm sure any man would be lucky enough to be with you. You are quite bold going after me and my niece. How much greedier could you get? She winked at him. Please, I can't take any more teasing. He covered his face, shrinking back down onto the couch. Namiri pulled his hands away from his face. He met her bright smile. I'd consider it if you were older, but for now, there's someone else waiting for you. With her hands still holding onto his face, she turned him to face a girl in the distance. While everyone else was dancing with a partner, Momo stood aside in a corner alone. A few guys would walk up to her and offer a dance to her. His eyes zoomed in enough to notice her uncomfortable face. The guys she rejected weren't bad-looking at all. Rather, they had all the features any girl would dream of having in a guy. They all had perfect hair, flawless suits, and confidence. What did Izuku have? A suit that didn't fit and a heart pounding so hard it might burst. His ears focused, trying to hear what she was saying. I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. Thank you for the compliment, but unfortunately I cannot. Sorry, but I don't feel well enough to dance. Izuku's fists clenched as he watched another guy walk away, leaving Momo standing there alone again. She looked sad even though she was smiling. His heart tightened. He knew that look, he'd worn it so many times. And here he was, hiding in the corner. Was he going to leave her alone like this? No, he couldn't. Not when she wanted him there. Not when he knew what it felt like to be on the outside. Those were the things she was telling everyone. Why do you think she isn't dancing with any of them? Namiri asked. His mind recalled an hour earlier, specifically just after they dressed and met up. She's smart enough to see through them. That's what she told me. What else did she tell you? That it'd be more fun if I was there. There was a guilt in his stomach. Would he choose to keep away just because of all the people there? Last time I checked, a quirkless kid risked his life for someone. Venom spoke. You stood out from your class, no powers or strength for shit, yet no pro came to stop me. Now you're thinking of leaving a girl alone because you stand out from these money-loving pimps? Namiri's playful smirk softened as she rested a hand on Izuku's shoulder. Go to her, she said, her voice a little quieter. She needs someone like you tonight. A real friend. I can't just go up there, I'll embarrass her. I'm sure she wouldn't mind. Plus, I think it'd be good for her. That girl's in a real need for some fun. His fists clenched and Izuku took a deep breath, hyping himself up. Namiri saw this and smiled. Don't worry, Izuku, you've got your charm, which happens to work on Momo. Just be yourself, I'll be watching just in case you need some backup. Her hand maintained a firm grip on his shoulder. She squeezed his shoulder with reassurance. Go get her. His heart was about to explode, but he couldn't back down now. Time seemed to slow down for him, each step taking hours and still not making any closer to her. The music in the background began fading out. The last thing he heard was Namiri's, good luck. Focus, what do you know about dancing? How do you dance to this type of music? What do I say to her when I get there? I can feel everyone's eyes watching me. You've risked your life for her once before, Izuku. And now you're scared of a little dance? Venom said. Yeah, but I had you with me. I would have died on the spot if it was just me. You didn't know about me, yet you still risked everything. Humans would say that you have a golden heart. You know you're stronger than them, so show it. All right? His footsteps overlapped with his heartbeat. His lungs work overtime to keep him conscious. Oh God, here goes nothing. Izuku's heart pounded as he finally reached her. They just stood there for a second, Momo adjusting her hair while Izuku fought for his words. But the way she looked at him, so genuine, so relieved, made all of his nerves melt away. This is exactly where he is meant to be. Sorry, at first I thought you were another one of those. Momo spoke up. These leeching rich boys? Sorry to disappoint, he joked, making them share a quick laugh. Momo wiped a tear from her eye. I'm glad it's you. These gatherings get exhausting very quickly, especially if you attend every one of them. Izuku moved to her side, leaning against the wall. I wanted to thank you for letting me attend this. Even though it's all too overwhelming. And I've been thinking of what you said earlier. Momo turned to face him. What did I say? Well, earlier I saw the guys coming up to you one by one. My quirk let me hear what you said to them, but I didn't mean to intrude. You didn't look too thrilled at all, and that reminded me of what you said. It would finally be enjoyable with you here. He scratched his cheek, which had a slight pinkish color. Momo seemed confused, her head tilting slightly. Adorable. I was also thinking the same thing while I sat down. Although it's mostly my fault, I wasn't enjoying my time here. It got too quiet even for me. I'm not saying the party sucks, your family did great. But I also thought that this would be much more enjoyable if I were with you. Oh, I see. Momo turned her gaze away. He heard her heartbeat speed up for a moment. She took a deep breath and her heart rate slowed down to normal. Okay, here goes nothing. So with that said, Momo, would you like to dance with me? He held his hand out to her and bowed slightly, copying the other guy's actions. His eyes stared intently at her own, not an ounce of fear. Izuku's heart raced as he waited for her answer, and for a second he wondered if he had said the wrong thing. But then Momo's eyes softened, her smile brightening in a way that made the entire room disappear. Her fingers slipped into his, warm and soft, and in that moment he knew, this was right. Momo's heart had skipped a beat as Izuku held out his hand to her. For a moment she couldn't believe that he was standing in front of her, asking her to dance. You'd like to dance with me? Yes, but could you teach me? He shrunk back down, his former facade diminishing. I'm willing to learn from you. Her fingers tingled as they reached for his hand, a small smile tugged at the corners of her red lips. The warmth of her hand grounded him, calming the hurricane of nerves that had been swirling deep inside him. Izuku was the first outsider to recognize her for more than a Yaoyorozu. He saw her. Her red lips curved into a smile, her hand falling into his own like a puzzle piece. I'd love that, Izuku. Wrap your arms around my waist, she commanded, her onyx eyes looking at his emerald eyes. He complied, although with a slight hesitation. He could feel the stares, hear the whispers, and smell the jealousy from the people around them. But Momo tugged his hand to break him out of his trance. She smiled, putting her hands on his shoulders. As they stepped onto the dance floor, Izuku's heart pounded louder than all of the music in the room. He felt Momo's hands hold onto his shoulders, and his hands holding onto Momo's slim waist. The soft melody of the music swirled around them, but he could barely listen to it. The entire world had narrowed down just to her. He tried to remember what he knew about dancing, any movies he'd seen or comics he'd read. He looked down often to avoid stepping on Momo's feet, clumsily missing a step or two, but Momo was there to steady him. Just follow my lead, she whispered, her voice soothing like a warm breeze on a cool night. Izuku audibly gulped, I'll do my best. They swayed together with the guidance of Momo, their steps were light and slow. Izuku was sure he would trip over any second, but Momo's eyes calmed him. Her smile reassured him as if saying, it's okay if it's not perfect. Everything else blurred out, the light casting down on her alone. The steady beats of the music guided them. His awkwardness melted slightly, making him move more confidently and smoothly. For the first time, it felt as if this was where he was supposed to be. You're doing great, Momo whispered, her hands still on his shoulders as they swayed. Izuku could only smile, feeling lighter than he had all evening. The number of guests started dwindling little by little, it got quieter. Izuku sat back down in another corner by himself, reading the messages that his mom had left him. It was getting late and he wouldn't be able to make the last train, so he was slightly worried. It felt like he had overstayed his stay with the Yaoyorozus, and he began dreading the chat he would have with Momo's parents. He returned the borrowed suit and used their showers. After that, he changed into a gifted set of pajamas, which was weird to him, considering that he was going home in bedwear. That was an eventful day, but we never got to have any meat. Venom echoed in his thoughts, his hunger present. Yeah, sorry about that. Maybe I could ask for some to take home or at least get us some chocolate. You're less tense than before. Guess dancing with the girl did you some good after all. Well, yeah. I mean, it was nice that I could help her enjoy the party. But his phone buzzed in his pocket, interrupting their conversation. It's Mom, I gotta take this. Izuku held the phone to his ear. Hey Mom. Sorry I didn't answer earlier, I was busy helping my friend study. Izuku, you never told me that it was a Yaoyorozu? Have you been good? We can't afford to cause them any trouble. Izuku flinched back from his phone. He chuckled. Mom, I promise you I've been on my best behavior, and wait. How did you know that I was with Yaoyorozu? Dear, they called me earlier today. They said that it was too late to be taking the train home and that they would let you stay the night. I'm glad they called me, but I had to set a few ground rules for you, you hear me? Her voice sounded stern and Izuku froze up. Why, yes ma'am. Good. You should thank the Yaoyorozus for letting you stay. Be polite and help like how I raised you. Understood. Understood. I love you, Mom. Good night. I love you too, honey. Good night. With an audible click, the phone call ended and Izuku walked out of the shower with a towel over his shoulder. Turning the corner, he ran into a lady with elegance that matched Momo's. Standing tall and powerful, Mrs. Yaoyorozu looked down at him with a light smile. Izuku almost fell to his knees right on the spot from her sheer presence. Izuku, just the person I was looking for. Please follow me. She turned around and began walking. Izuku followed, with only the sound of her heels filling the hall. After passing a few rooms, Mrs. Yaoyorozu stopped at the huge silver door. She opened it and invited him in. Mr. Yaoyorozu was also there, at the far end of the room. He sat at a desk with his hands interlocked. His wife closed the door behind the two. Izuku managed to get a few deep breaths in before his heart rate sped up. Mrs. Yaoyorozu walked past him and stationed herself next to her husband. Have a seat, Midoriya. He zoomed into the seat and sat down, his back straightened. Did that man have a mind control quirk? Or was his voice that commanding? We saw the stunt you pulled with my daughter. Answer this for me, how long have you two know each other? He asked, his gaze sharpening. Izuku couldn't move a muscle, too paralyzed to respond. Eventually he spoke, Seriously? I can't mutter now, focus, Izuku. Only a couple of weeks, sir? He bowed before the couple. I want to apologize if I offended you. The woman sighed. Lift your head, Izuku. We have to ask you, what are your intentions with our daughter? Her smile vanished and now she displayed her powerful gaze that matched her husband's. The four eyes burned his composure down bit by bit. She's a friend, I swear. He fought back the tears from building in his eyes. My Momo has never danced with anyone in any of our gatherings, ever. I want you to explain to me how she chose you out of everyone else. Why did she choose a boy she had only known for a couple of weeks? He lightly tapped his desk with his index finger, causing Izuku to visibly flinch. Are you aware of what that looks like to everyone else? How it makes us look? How it would affect Momo? Izuku shrunk down in his seat more and more. He was on the brink of collapsing, but he pinched his legs to regain focus. I didn't think of that. She has taken a special interest in you that we have never seen, Mrs. Yaoyorozu spoke. This can go a lot better for you if you tell us everything. Oh God, oh God, oh God. What else do they want from me? I'm gonna barf. Mom, I'm sorry. Go beyond. Why yes. Momo is my friend and I want to help you become a hero. I respect her a lot. He did his best to stare down at the couple, his gaze faltering merely seconds in. All he could hear was the clock ticking like a bomb about to explode. Piff, Mrs. Yaoyorozu smiled, covering her mouth with her hand. It didn't last long as she busted out laughing. Her husband had a small smile on his face. Izuku looked back and forth between the two, too shocked to ask anything. Relax, Midoriya. We were merely jesting. He stood up and held his wife's hand. We were only testing you. We know you're a good kid. Izuku stuttered in response, still recovering. Mrs. Yaoyorozu wiped the tears from her eyes, catching her breath from laughing. Momo talks about you all the time. We were just curious about the boy she holds in high regard. With a blush on his face, Izuku replied, To thank you. Momo has been helping me a lot. Although I'm not that strong, I will do my best to support her. His voice cracked at the end. The couple continued to laugh, even the husband. Izuku felt awkward. He didn't appreciate their joking, but he wasn't in the position to speak up against it. Still, he's glad the talk didn't have to do with anything bad. Mr. Yaoyorozu's laughter slowed down until it stopped. His wife did the same, returning to her soft smile. Izuku noticed and composed himself. Whatever they were about to say next was important. What happened next had his jaw on the floor. Both Mr. and Mrs. Yaoyorozu bowed deeply towards Izuku. The silence was tentative, almost crushing. All jokes aside, Midoriya. We owe you a great deal of gratitude. His wife chimed in. We've been meaning to say this since the day you saved my Momo, but we truly appreciate what you did for our daughter. When we found out what happened, I couldn't bear to see my baby girl get hurt if you weren't there. Mr. Yaoyorozu hugged his wife. When we got the call about her assault, we dropped everything for her. We have always done everything in our power to protect Momo, but even then I can't foresee everything. It's not your fault. You two do so much for her already. He jumped from his seat, planting his hands on the man's desk. I only did what any hero would do. And even then I didn't do much. Momo was able to blind one of the thugs. I just helped her run away. I'll hear none of that. Mrs. Yaoyorozu placed a hand on his shoulder, tears streaming down her face. You saved her. You didn't save just my daughter but our entire world. I can't find the right words to express how grateful we are. We overheard. You were quirkless at the time, yet you threw yourself in danger for her. She said you didn't hesitate. That kind of bravery is rare these days even among pro-heroes," said Mr. Yaoyorozu. The woman grabbed his hair and played with it. It wasn't harsh or rough. "Our daughter is too smart, yet she constantly struggles with her self-esteem. I tried helping her in any way possible, but now I realize what she truly needed was a friend. A true friend. Tonight was the happiest I've seen her in years. We may have all of the resources in the world a phone call away, but there's something we could never buy: genuine friendship, your friendship." Her husband said, "What you did today, despite unprecedented, was not unwelcomed. We trust you, Izuku. And we know that you're the perfect one for our daughter. Momo is in good hands with someone like you by her side." Izuku bowed. "Thank you, I will do my best to make sure Momo becomes the greatest. I believe it." Mr. Yaoyorozu picked up a slip of paper and wrote something down on it and gave it to him. "If you ever need anything, our home is open to you and your mother, Midoriya. You've shown us that you are more than Momo's friend. You are someone we are happy to call part of our family now." His wife shook Izuku's head slightly rougher now, making him dizzy. "Just promise me one thing. Keep taking care of her, just as you did today." She flicked his forehead. "She told us you also want to go to UA too. Just as you wish to support my baby girl, we will support you as well. You both will be the greatest. You have a golden heart, Izuku. If you need anything, and we mean anything, as you prepare for UA, whether it's resources or training, we'll be there for you." The dam broke and a couple of tears escaped him. "Sorry? Thank you, ma'am. Sir. I'll go beyond. You have my word." "Good, now go get some rest. We promised your mother that you'd be home at the earliest." The woman pats his head before sending him off. Now I'm fired up. Months had gone by and now he was at the 1-year mark from the UA entrance exam. The green-haired boy and his symbiotic companion marched into the forest, following their usual routine. His last year of middle school didn't start until 2 weeks from now, but he didn't feel nervous. These past few months had been going well for him. His mother had been so supportive of him finally getting a quirk, that she even gave him ideas on improving his training, mainly his diet. He still constantly ate chocolate and meat to keep his companion in check though. Since he's kept consistent with his training, he's noticeably bulked up a bit, having to change some of his shirts. He had also gotten a bit taller. The height difference between him and Jiro remained the same as she had grown too, but the difference between him and Momo shortened a bit. Izuku had split up his workouts between going to Quirk Gym and training with the people there, or going into the forest and training his symbiotic powers solo. Once he was deep enough into the forest, he put on his custom earplugs for his hearing. Venom theorized that as he got stronger, he could control his hearing better. He and Jiro had designed them to fit his look, while Momo's parents managed to have them made and delivered. With everything set, Izuku did his stretches and warm-up runs. "Let's up the training again this time, Venom." "Got it. You've been handling everything with ease and I'm impressed. I've had help from everyone, you included." After warm-ups, Izuku regained his stance. "Ready? Let's go." Izuku's veins turned black, spreading from his heart to the rest of his body. Then he blasted off, maneuvering past any trees and obstacles in his way. Constantly getting hit and beat up by Momo had encouraged him to focus and analyze on becoming more flexible. Then he practiced his punches and kicks on huge rocks he found. Thankfully, Venom healed his knuckles and feet after. Since he'd bulked up a bit, he was now able to use around 5% of Venom's power. He even got a new power which Venom called Tendril. Right now he could only use one that stretched out for about a few feet. It was capable of grabbing and holding items without the trouble of worrying about their weight. He could also reinforce his fist with the same black substance that the tendril was made of, similar to a boxing glove or brass knuckle. Momo's trainer had helped him get the basics of hand-to-hand combat down, and he'd expand his twist on it. "Now let's try the tendril." He held his hand out. Deep breath in, then out. A shut. He visualized the tendril as another limb, mainly a hand. He aimed for the nearby tree, trying to grab it. He felt himself get pulled forward, which he opened his eyes to. "I did it," he panted. "You've been doing this same routine for days now. You need to be able to do this without sitting on Eurostring to visualize anything. You leave yourself open." "I know, Momo's told me the same thing, but I'm stuck right now." He opened and closed his hand. "I'll keep training harder." He spent the rest of the morning pushing himself forward with his training until it was noon. Last month, Izuku introduced Jiro to Momo when he got the idea of his earplugs. He was a bit nervous as he didn't know how the two would interact with each other, but everything turned out well in the end. Although Jiro and Momo looked like two complete opposites at face value, They had more in common than he could think of. Today he was meeting up with them for some food. Momo's parents had given her permission to go out as long as Izuku was with her. Of course, he accepted the responsibility if it meant he could hang out with her more, but he did get a whole mountain of teasing from Venom and his mom. His phone beeped. It was from Jiro. "Yo Green, I'll send you the address for the meetup. Make sure to pass it on to Momo." "Sure thing. I'm picking her up soon, so I'll let you know when we're on our way." He texted back. "Picking her up, huh? You're becoming more of a man, Green? Or maybe Momo's into shrimps." Jiro jabbed at him. He'd gotten used to her banter and even learned sometimes to retort. Izuku laughed as he typed his reply, "If you're jealous I could go pick you up too." Jiro started texting rapidly. He couldn't hold his laughter on the train. They kept the banter up till he was at his station. Izuku then used around 2% to run to Momo's place, making it in record time. She waited for him at the gate with her parents. Izuku greeted the two and then he and Momo went into her car with their driver. The restaurant Jiro sent him wasn't too far away. On the drive, Momo decided to make conversation. "You've grown so much in these past few months, Izuku. You also look much healthier than before. It's because you've been a great teacher. I can finally understand your college books and even Jiro's getting the hang of it. Plus, you keep filling me up with that tea addiction of yours that I don't think I can go back to water." "I'm not addicted. I'd say I'm passionate about it," she said with a faux offense. "We don't complain about your chocolate addiction." Her rebuttal had them both laughing in the car. He made sure to send Jiro a text that they were 5 minutes away and she replied saying that she had saved them a table. Once they arrived, they stood before the food joint. It had a Western theme with posters in English. They spotted Jiro as she waved for them. Momo sat beside her while Izuku sat across the two. Izuku rubbed his shoulder, the strain from his training taking effect. Jiro noticed it and with her usual smirk said, "Looks like you've been busy putting on some muscle." He laughed awkwardly, rubbing his neck. "Why, yeah, I've been trying. My quirks allowed me to enhance my speed a bit, but I get stomach aches when I eat too much chocolate. On the bright side, Momo's tea helps." Momo held her hands together, smiling. "I'll say it again, but I'm glad you've been so diligent, Izuku. You two have been a great help. I've been working on how fast I can use creation for close-quarter training. I also expanded my dictionary with better organized notes, thanks to you. What about you, Jiro?" Jiro was playing around with her earlobe. "Me? Meh, just fine-tuning my sound attacks. Green gave me the idea to practice jamming my jacks into sturdier objects to increase their strength. I'm also able to lift heavier stuff with them too." Their food arrived not too long after and they began to eat in silence, with the sound of the TV occasionally catching their attention. "I can't believe the entrance exam is 1 year away. I'm so nervous," Izuku said, holding a hand to his stomach and making a barfing gesture. "You dude. If you're going to spew barf, do it to Yaoyorozu." Jiro aimed her ear jacks at him, ready to attack. Momo didn't seem fazed by their gross jokes. "Speaking of UA, I wanted to let you two know that they're turning the academy into a dormitory school. My father told me that students will be living there on the second week." "Yeah, I heard that too, but I don't get why the second week, why not the first? I get that they're trying to keep the students safe after everything that's been happening," Jiro said. Izuku faced the window, getting distracted by the busy street. "I heard there's a teacher there so strict that he holds the record for expelling the most students in a short amount of time. Maybe they take the first week to watch which kids could cause them trouble. Or which ones aren't worth it." Jiro interrupted, getting odd looks from Momo and Izuku. "Anyways," Momo said, "I'm sure there's nothing to worry about. My father has assured me that UA has been increasing their security to the utmost. We should focus on the fact that we are going to be neighbors." "What about the scary teacher Green mentioned? We shouldn't worry about that?" Jiro winced, fidgeting with her hands harshly. Momo noticed and held her hands. "We will be more than ready for whatever that teacher has for us." "PSH, whatever you say. How about you, Green? You know, whoa." Izuku hugged himself while trembling. "UA's where the best of the best attend. Despite working hard, I still feel like I'm still playing catch-up." His shaking got to the point where the table was shaking. "I'm sure you are more prepared than you think, Izuku. From what you've told me, your quirk has been evolving more quickly than average. Although we don't get to train together as often, we've all made progress in this past month." As the trio continued talking, the TV in the restaurant switched to the news report, catching their attention. Continuing coverage of a string of violent attacks across the city. Authorities are still investigating the mysterious figure responsible for the latest wave of destruction. The camera footage provided shows low-quality images of the persecutor who appears to be a 8-foot, inhumane individual. Authorities still haven't released any official details, but the public is calling this villain a carnage. For now, the public is advised to stay vigilant and to travel in groups. If possible, avoid traveling late at night. The screen showed brief flashes of various crime scenes. Twisted metal, smashed buildings and vehicles. There were censored photos of human remains which Momo and Jiro winced away at. Izuku managed to keep his stomach in check. Izuku frowned. Another attack. They've been happening more often lately. Those streaks. I don't like this. His companion, Venom, spoke in an uncharacteristic tone. How have none of your heroes found him yet? I'm not sure. But the way he kills. Leaving people headless or sometimes worse. I heard about that too. It's way past freaky. Why kind of monster leaves people like that? Jiro struggled to finish her sentence. Momo narrowed her eyes. There's been a lot of talk about those attacks, all done by one person? My parents are worried. It's why they've been investing more in hero support equipment lately. Izuku subconsciously fidgeted with his thumbs. Whoever it is, they're terrifying. They've managed to take down some pro-heroes too. Maybe it's just some wannabe trying to make a name for themselves, maybe the Izuku? Maybe. The trio fell silent, watching the broadcast shift to lighter news, but no joke could shake off the ominous feeling. Let's hope that they'll get caught before our entrance exams. Izuku declared, gaining a confident nod from Momo and a lackluster thumbs up from Jiro. I'm not really good with this cheesy stuff, Jiro said, shying away as she toyed with the ice in her drink. But no matter what happens, I'm glad we've got our little group to call our own. And if when? Izuku cut her off, smiling. Jiro laughed at how dumb he looked. When we get into UA. I hope we end up in the same class. That would be amazing. I could share my tea with you both and the rest of the class every night. Momo cheered, but the response was mixed. Izuku groaned at the thought. No matter what, we'll support each other through it all. Izuku stepped off the train and into the station. He sent the girls a message letting them know he was back safely. The station was surprisingly full for the time. Grown-ups were heading home for the day, college students were heading out for drinks, and middle schoolers were hanging out. That uniform. It's similar to that girl from our first mission. You've gotten stronger, but remember what I told you. I know, but you should know how I feel. I hope she's okay. I still need to get her name. It's because I feel what you feel that I tell you this. Your desire to help her is unheard of. You'll end up hurting yourself if you go on with your plan. Maybe I would be hurt if I were alone, but I've got you too, right? You've always said we'd be unstoppable, and I'm also starting to believe that. Izuku whispered, his head held high. Don't expect flattery to work on me. It's the thing that works the most on you, Izuku laughed, but you're still right. If we meet again, I will be on my guard. He turned the corner, his mind focused on the next entry of his journal, and he didn't notice the person in front of him. They collided and fell away from each other. Izuku panicked a bit. He saw the grocery bags on the ground and rushed to pick them up. I'm so sorry. I should have been watching where I was go dash. His heart immediately sped up and so did his breathing. The hairs on his hands stood up, screaming at him to move. Izuku arms up. He stood up, arms held up before himself. A black mass reinforced his fist and forearms. Knees bent, Izuku prepared for an impact. But nothing ever came. What are you doing? A feminine voice spoke up. Izuku's emerald eyes stared back at her golden ones. It's her. Izuku's arm prepared to swing on its own but staggered mid-swing. What are you doing? That monster is right there. I said I'd keep my guard up. But let me talk to her. The girl stared at him confused. To anyone else, Izuku was standing there with his arm up like a mime. Izuku panicked, waving his arms around before coughing. You're the girl from... Izuku looked around like crazy, making sure no one else was listening in. The girl, with a blush over her face, said, Don't worry, I made sure no one else followed me. She held her hands behind her back. He noticed that she was still in her school uniform, but it was much messier than before. On the brighter side, she looked healthier since he last saw her months ago. Her cheekbones weren't visible anymore and her legs looked stronger too. It's rude to stare. Izuku took deep breaths to calm his nerves. They must have reacted to the girl because Venom remembered her scent. Although Izuku saw the girl as amenable, Venom was raging to go forth and kill her. Sorry? I didn't think. Izuku Midoriya? He bowed, unable to speak. As he stared at the sidewalk he heard the girl giggle. He stood back up with her bags in hand. He reached out to hand them back to her but stopped halfway. You paid for these, right? He narrowed his eyes. The girl put her hands behind her back and leaned forward to him. Are you gonna arrest me? She grinned, revealing a pair of fangs that went along with her feline eyes. I don't think I can do that. Wait. He realized her joke and sighed. How are you doing? Himiko. No last name, Izuku. She answered with a monotone voice. Her face changed to one of disgust, but the blush remained. This time she stepped close to him and took her bags from his hand. I used up everything I have for these, so don't worry. Izuku kept staring at her. He couldn't help but recall their first meeting. How frail and feeble she looked back then. Even if she attacked me, there had to be a reason. Money? Apparently not. Venom? Impossible. Maybe food, but it's not enough. You look better now, he said. I'm glad. It was scary not knowing what happened to you. Himiko raised an eyebrow. Really? Even after? Well, you know. I remember, he laughed. But, yeah. Do you live nearby? I recognized those grocery bags from the nearby convenience store by my house. Himiko broke eye contact. Something like that? You're weird. Izuku stammered. Huh? Did I say something wrong? He reached out to her. Himiko put a finger to her chin and tilted her head. I don't think so, but you're just weird, she bluntly said. Those words hurt more than any of Kaken's blasts. A hit right in the heart. Himiko began walking away from his display, most likely to avoid being seen around him. Wait, Himiko. Oh, let's talk. The two sat at a park bench. It was the same one that Izuku had trained at. The one where he broke his foot and Venom had to mend it. The sun was past its high point and Izuku's mom would be arriving home very soon. He sent her a text to let her know not to worry in case his talk with Himiko took longer than expected. They sat apart from each other, Himiko's bags filling in the space between them, almost acting like a barrier. I'll rip her apart if she tries anything, Venom declared, his dark voice seething with anger. Don't say that. Why did you attack me that night? Izuku asked, not facing her. His fingers tapped his thighs with fear. He wanted answers. He remembered what her eyes looked like that night, but he would also consider Venom's warnings. Himiko, also avoiding eye contact, went into one of her grocery bags and pulled out a pomegranate. Izuku had flinched lightly at her sudden movement. She ignored it as she pulled out a knife from her sleeve, sliced the fruit open and dug in. Again, Izuku reeled back at the sight of the weapon. Himiko only rolled her eyes in annoyance, letting out an audible sigh. Izuku shifted uncontrollably, glancing at Himiko as her feet swung under the bench. Unlike him, Himiko seemed relaxed, chewing into her fruit, which only fueled his anxiety. I was hungry, she replied, her tone not showing emotion. You got your answer, kid. Now let's get rid of her. Izuku ignored Venom's urging. It took everything to hold in a tongue click. Instead he took a deep breath. Himiko, where have you been staying? He asked, trying to ask it casually. Himiko's feline eyes reacted slightly, her knife pausing midway through the second fruit. Her golden eyes flickered to him, narrowing slightly as if internally debating if she should answer honestly or not. She didn't answer right away, hugging one of her bags up to her chest and leaning back, staring at the pink sky. Here and there, she answered with a flick of the wrist. She shrugged. It's not like I have a lot of options. But it doesn't concern you, Izuku. Her voice was light, but there was no life behind them. That was something Izuku definitely wouldn't ignore. Sorry, but I do worry, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. It's just, after last time I didn't know if you were okay. I wanted to find you, but I didn't know how to look for you. Himiko blinked, finally turning towards him completely, and tilted her head at him. That's what makes you so weird. Why do you care so much? I'm no normal girl, but I'm sure anyone would want to run away from their attacker. Izuku bit his lip, unsure how to answer. He didn't really know why he cared either. All he knew was that he saw something in her eyes that night. There's something about Himiko he needed to know. It was like something was inside her that didn't want to stay trapped. I guess. I just don't like the idea of someone being alone, he said softly. Himiko's playful smile wavered for a moment, her expression unreadable. What makes you think I'm alone? I've got tons of friends. Izuku shifted on the bench, copying her seating position. Besides the obvious reasons, it's your eyes. There's something in them that makes you afraid? Himiko interrupted, sharpening her gaze on him. Venom didn't send any alarms, so he didn't move as much as an inch. It was a failure of intimidation. That is calling out for help, he finished. She opened her mouth to say something but looked away, her eyes scanning the park. "You're definitely weird," she mumbled, bringing the pomegranate up to her mouth. Venom snarled, "This is a waste of time. She'll stab you the moment you turn away." Izuku tensed but forced himself to relax. He could almost feel Venom's rage simmering beneath his skin, itching to take control. "Not now, Venom. Please, can't you see that she needs help? You're making a mistake." Izuku clenched his right fist, making sure it was out of Himiko's view. He quickly glanced at his fist, his veins pulsing black, ready to lash out. He took a deep, cold breath, grounding himself, doing everything possible to hold Venom back. Yeah, maybe Venom was right. Maybe this was all a mistake, asking to talk to her, interrogating her, trying to help her. But somewhere deep down in his gut, he knew there was something else going on with Himiko than what Venom said. While Venom saw a wolf in sheep's clothing, he saw someone crying out for help. And for now, that was enough for him to stay seated beside her. "Can I have some fruit too? It looks delicious." Himiko broke out of her feast, pomegranate juice over her mouth and teeth. Izuku couldn't hold back his laughter at her appearance. Himiko's confused look made him try to hide his smile, which failed as Himiko closed the distance between the two, her eyes prying him. She blinked, her cheeks flushing ever so slightly. But then her lips curved into a mischievous grin as if daring him to keep laughing. "What's so funny?" she asked, her tone lighter than before. Izuku still held his hand to his mouth, stifling his laugh. Before he could speak, Himiko shoved a pomegranate in his face, covering him in its sticky juices. Izuku panicked, biting into the fruit and melting as his tongue met its juices. After eating his portion, he removed it from his hand. "Now we look alike." The playful moment quickly faded, though, as Izuku's expression turned serious. "Himiko," he began softly, "if you'd like, I could help you find a place to stay. I haven't told anyone about me meeting you, I swear. We don't need to get any authorities involved." His gaze met hers, his green eyes soft with genuine concern. Himiko's expression faltered, her usual confidence slipping as her eyes widened in surprise. She wasn't expecting this, wasn't expecting him. Slowly, almost unconsciously, she slid her knife back into her sleeve and hugged her legs to her chest, turning her back to him. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I want to help," Izuku said gently. "You really need a shower and maybe you could stay at my place. My mom's really nice and she cooks amazing food." Himiko didn't respond, didn't even look at him. But Izuku could see the subtle changes in her posture, the way her fingers trembled slightly, how she scratched at her wrist and tugged at her hair. Her breathing became uneven, quick and shallow, and she started shaking so much that she didn't notice her fine slipping from her sleeve, dangerously close to her wrist. Izuku's senses screamed in warning, and without thinking, he lunged forward, grabbing her wrist just as the blade slipped free. Himiko flinched violently at his touch, recoiling in shock. Her reflexes kicked in instantly. She elbowed Izuku in the gut, sending him sprawling onto the dirt. In one swift, fluid motion, she scooped the knife back up and stood over him, her fangs bared. "What was that?" she growled, her voice low and dangerous. The knife in her hand trembled, twitching back and forth as if she couldn't quite decide what to do next. "I knew it. She's going to kill us." Venom roared in Izuku's mind, his voice filled with fury. "No, no." Izuku gasped, holding up his hands defensively. He didn't even realize he was speaking out loud. "It was a misunderstanding. Let me explain." His heart pounded in his chest as he shrank back, his eyes wide with fear. "Why, you were shaking and your knife almost cut you." Himiko's expression wavered for a moment, her golden eyes flicking to her wrist where the knife had been so close to cutting her. Her breathing slowed, and the tension in her shoulders eased just a fraction. But the knife remained in her hand, hovering in the air between them. Izuku took a deep breath, still on the ground, his hands trembling. I just didn't want you to get hurt," he said softly, his voice barely a whisper. For a long, agonizing moment, Himiko didn't move. She just stared down at him, her face unreadable. Then, slowly, the knife lowered. She stepped back, her expression softening just a little. "You're so weird, Izuku," she muttered, her voice filled with something close to disbelief. But there was no malice in it, only confusion. She turned away from him, her grip on the knife loosening. "You're not like anyone else." Izuku let out a breath he didn't know he was holding, his heart still racing in his chest. He had no idea how close he had come to being hurt, or worse, but somehow he'd gotten through to her. Somehow he was still standing. "Thank you," he said quietly, standing up and brushing the dirt off his clothes. "For not. You know." Himiko chuckled softly, wiping her knife on her sleeve before tucking it away again. Don't get used to it. She looked at him sideways, her lips twitching into a small, almost reluctant smile. But, thanks for not running away. Izuku, back on his feet, held his hand with a determined smile. My offer still stands, Himiko. It was Himiko's turn to laugh, making Izuku mirror her earlier reaction. Unlike himself, she didn't try to cover her laughter and instead pulled out a napkin and cleaned all of the mud and dirt from his face. Izuku chuckled softly too, and eventually they both shared a laugh. Does your mom have pomegranates? She grinned, confidently displaying her fangs. A week prior, under a relentless downpour in a forgotten industrial area, Detective Tsukachi ducked under the police tape. The rain did nothing to wash away the metallic stench of blood clinging to the air. The buildings around were rusty and old, crumbling and rust-covering steel beams. The site was once a small factory, but now it was left in ruins. Due to the isolation, the entire block had become a hotspot for criminal activity. The entire place is cordoned off by police tape, with the flashing lights of patrol cars illuminating the dark, eerie scene. It's a late evening with rain and cold wind blowing through the cracks of the broken building. Heroes and law enforcement had already arrived, securing the perimeter while the forensics team gathered their evidence. Detective Tsukachi arrived at the scene, accompanied by the underground hero, Eraserhead. Originally, the police had received a distress call that they tracked down to this location. Death Arms had been called to the scene, but after not receiving any feedback in over 24 hours, Tsukachi and Eraser were called. Sorry for pulling you out of your teacher duties, Eraser, but I needed your experience with this case. I've been chasing down this guy for months now, but it's been radio silent until today. Tsukachi said, handing the case file to Eraser. Eraserhead flipped through the file with his usual detachment, but even he couldn't hide the slight narrowing of his eyes as he took in the details. Don't worry about it, he said in a monotone voice. I needed some time away from my problem children anyways. How many bodies have been found so far? So far only 3. They're mostly low-level thugs and petty criminals, but we still haven't found a trace of Death Arms. They continued talking as they scouted the building, passing the soaked body sheets. All male small-time troublemakers? Yet they are involved in something this major? Eraser furrowed his eyebrows, deep in thought. Did we get the name of whoever made the call? Tsukachi nodded and pointed to the body sheet closest to the entrance of the building, which was also the most tainted area. Torso ripped open by hand. There's parts of him outside on the street. We haven't checked the other floors, but we believe there are a few more bodies upstairs. Eraser used his scarf to cover his nose from the stench. This place was a bloodbath. There were deep gouge marks in the concrete and walls, likely from the assailant. Tsukachi pulled out his flashlight and a plastic evidence bag and crouched down near one of the marks on the walls. What is that? The hero asked, kneeling with him. Tsukachi shook the plastic evidence bag. Frustration was evident in his voice. We've seen this before months ago, but no one can tell me what it is, just that it's not from any known quirk. The bag contained a small piece of red goo with a black pattern. Eraser took the bag. So we know that the same villain from before did this? His killing methods are more brutal than before, but everybody has one thing in common. No one keeps their head. His words were so heavy that neither of them could hear the rain outside anymore. There's also this one thing that's been bothering me. Around the same time as the last attack, we received a report of 3 bodies found on the shore of a beach. At first, there wasn't any connection between the cases until my partner checked it out himself and found something similar to this. He signaled to the bag. The colors are slightly different, but I think it was the same guy responsible for this, which is more terrifying. The beach is on the other side of Japan, yet they happened merely hours apart. So this guy is both fast, brutal, and merciless. You said there's no records of any similar quirks, right? The detective shook his head, a despondent face on him. Tsukachi's flashlight reflected off of something on the ground, catching Eraser's attention. Eraser held up the button, the weight of it far heavier than the scrap of fabric should be. A school uniform. This doesn't belong here. His voice dropped lower, almost a whisper. To kill like this, and so young. All of the victims were in their early to mid-20s, thankfully. But none of them wore a uniform. Does that mean whoever did this is much younger than we'd expect? Eraser couldn't finish his sentence. He took some time to compose himself. I'll be on the lookout for whichever school this belongs to. All of a sudden, Tsukachi's radio beeps. He turns it out and calls out, "What's the situation?" The voice on the other side sounded panicked and downright traumatized, begging for help. "Sir, we found Death Arms, but he's..." The two looked at one another before running off in the direction of the body, being guided by the man on the radio. The smell hit them first, stronger than any crime scene Tsukachi had encountered. And when he stepped into the room, the sight made his stomach turn. Blood dripped from the ceiling, pooling around Death Arm's headless torso like a grotesque mural. Death Arms had been a hero, strong, dependable. Now his remains were a message painted in blood across the walls. Tsukachi's heart raced, but his face remained impassive. Whoever did this wasn't just killing, they were sending a message, and it was only a matter of time before the city bled even more. 8 months until the UA exam June. The sharp clang of metal weights echoed throughout the gym, mingling with the steady thrum of upbeat music and occasional cheers from the regulars. Sweat dripped from his forehead, pooling on the bench beneath him. Around him, a small crowd had gathered, mostly his gym bros, all watching with anticipation. Kirishima stood by the side of the bench, grinning from ear to ear, fist clenched in excitement. "All right, Mido bro?" Kirishima called out, his spiky red hair bouncing as he nodded. "You've got this, man. Hit that new PR and show him what you're made of." Kirishima's voice boomed, loud enough to drown out any doubt in Izuku's mind. Izuku glanced up at the bar, loaded with more weight than he'd ever attempted before. His arms already felt sore from earlier sets, but the adrenaline pumping through his veins told him to keep going. His training with Venom had taken him to new heights, and today was the day he would see how far he could push himself. With a deep breath, he wrapped his hands around the cool steel bar. "Let's go, man," one of his gym bros shouted. "You're about to crush it, bro." "Yeah, don't let up," Kirishima added. "You're strong as hell, ain't no way you're backing down now." Even Mina, who was currently going through her own set of exercises, had taken a moment to watch, her pink skin glistening as she caught her breath. Nearby, Himiko stood off to the side, lifting a dumbbell with one hand while watching Izuku with a mix of amusement and curiosity. She had been coming to the gym more often, not just to work out but also to watch Izuku train. Something was captivating about the way he pushed himself, always striving to be better. Even now, she found herself intrigued by his determination. "Go, Midoriya. You're about to crush it." Mina cheered, giving him a thumbs up, her voice full of energy as she leaned against the dumbbell rack, her eyes flicking to Kirishima with a playful grin. Himiko remained quieter, more of an observer than a participant, but Izuku could feel her golden eyes on him, watching him intently. She was there often now, tagging along with Mina whenever they trained, and although she hadn't taken to the exercises like the others, Izuku knew she liked being around, maybe because she was still figuring out what to make of this new life. Izuku inhaled deeply, feeling the familiar surge of adrenaline rush through him. The barbell above him was loaded with weights more than he'd ever tried before, but this was the day. He could feel Venom's presence, subtly supporting him, even though they agreed to limit their bond in public. Venom's voice hummed in his head. "You've done more in training, Izuku. This should be easy." With a loud grunt, Izuku started to lower the bar toward his chest, his arms trembling as the weight pressed down on him. His muscles burned, every fiber working in overdrive. He bit down on his lip, sweat trickling down his temple as he began the press upward, fighting against the gravitational force pulling the bar back down. His world narrowed to the bar above him, the sound of his friend's encouragement blending into the background. "A little more power. We can do this." Venom's voice, though faint, echoed in his mind, giving him that extra push. With a surge of strength, Izuku drove the bar upward, his muscles screaming in protest but responding to the pressure. The barbell hovered for a moment, then with one final burst of energy, it locked into place above him. "Yeah!" Kirishima yelled, grabbing the bar and helping Izuku rack it back up. The moment the weight clicked into place, the gym erupted into cheers. "Hell yeah, Midobro. You did it." Kirishima clapped him on the back, his grin even wider than before. "New personal record, man. That's unbreakable spirit right there." Izuku sat up, his chest rising and falling rapidly, still trying to catch his breath. He couldn't help but smile, the sense of accomplishment washing over him. He wiped the sweat from his forehead, giving a thumbs up to everyone. "Thanks, everyone. I couldn't have done it without your support." Himiko raised an eyebrow as she uncrossed her arms and walked over, her usual mischievous smirk on her face. "So, this is what all the fuss is about? Lifting a giant metal bar?" Izuku laughed, still panting. "Well, yeah. It's more about pushing yourself and—" Before he could finish, Mina, who had made her way over, slung an arm around Himiko's shoulder. "Don't listen to her, Midoriya." Himiko's secretly impressed. "You should see her try to lift even half that weight," she said with a playful wink at Himiko, who rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. Mina then turned to Kirishima, poking him in the ribs with a teasing smile. You see that? Even Midoriya's breaking records now. You better watch out, Eiji. He might start out lifting you. Kirishima chuckled and wrapped his arm around Mina's waist, pulling her close. Not a chance, babe. But Midobro's definitely catching up. You should join him sometime, Mina. We'll all get stronger together. Mina snickered, giving Kirishima a light shove. Only if you promise to carry me out of the gym when my legs give up. Deal? Kirishima replied, laughing. Himiko, still standing nearby, watched the group dynamic with a strange glint in her eye. She didn't say anything, but Izuku could tell she was taking everything in, processing the way everyone joked, cheered, and pushed each other. Maybe it was something she wasn't used to. Alright, who's next? Mina, you want to try benching your boyfriend next? Kirishima teased, causing her to punch him lightly in the arm. Izuku chuckled, feeling the energy of the moment. This camaraderie, the friendly competition, and the sense of belonging, it felt right. And maybe, just maybe, it was something Himiko was starting to feel too. As the group cooled down, the sound of clanging weights and shouts of encouragement filled the gym. The camaraderie in the air was infectious, and even though Izuku had hit his personal record, there was an unspoken understanding that this was just the beginning. Everyone had their own goals to chase. As the day wound down and people started finishing up their workouts, Kirishima nudged Izuku's shoulder, grinning widely. You ever think about applying what you're doing here to UA's entrance exam? I mean, man, you're strong. You'd crush the physical test. That's the plan, Izuku nodded. UA's super secretive about the entrance exam that not even my friends' parents who invest a lot into UA could get an idea of what it could be. He answered, then nudging Kirishima back. Also, how's your training been? Any progress? Kirishima lit up, holding up one of his arms and activating his quirk. His bicep and forearm made a sound like knives grinding each other. In return, his arm solidified instantly, becoming as tough as stone. Sure has, bro. Now I can keep my quirk going for about 6 minutes with your tips, and I've even gotten a better hang of you-know-what. He flashed a toothy grin and a thumbs up. Himiko, leaning against one of the machines, interjected. You've got the strength part down, Izuku. Maybe it's the rest of it you should be worrying about. Her teasing had a hint of seriousness, but it was clear she believed in his potential. But I'll give you this, you're not half bad. Just make sure you don't let your muscles get to your head. Izuku grinned at her, slightly winded from his intense workout but still full of energy. I'll keep that in mind. Also, it's time to go. Himiko lifted her wrist and pointed at her all-might watch. Izuku was surprised that she actually wore it. After convincing his mom to adopt Himiko, which was not easy, Himiko opened up to him bit by bit. He remembered how his blood boiled at hearing of her parents and what they did to her. Himiko also wasn't a huge fan of heroes in general, so it was an awkward conversation when she first saw his room, which was an all-might museum. It also made the watch, his first gift to her, an awkward moment for the two. Izuku and his mom were also the only ones who currently knew about Himiko's quirk and how uncomfortable it was for her to talk about its past. To avoid scaring her away, he decided to respect her privacy. Kirishima handed him his gym bag and his water bottle. Same time Wednesday, Midobro? Mina stood beside them, resting her elbow on her boyfriend's red spiky hair. He took the bag and bottle before fist-bumping Kirishima. Sure thing, man. Keep working on you. He smirked at his friend, who did the same in return. Geez, you boys and your secrets. The pink girl exclaimed. It must be something pretty serious if you're hiding it from me, babe. She continued to play with Kirishima's hair. Trust me. When I get a better hang of it, you'll be the first one I show it to. That seemed like a good enough answer for her, since she wrapped an arm around his shoulder gently. Mina suddenly pointed at Himiko before she left. You better be here next time too. I can't be the only one suffering from these two nerds. Himiko tilted her head at the sound of her name, pointing at herself with a confused look. You want me here? I am, sure. She replied with a tense smile before heading out with Izuku. Izuku couldn't ignore the slight smile she wore, but felt like he'd ruin the moment by saying anything. Instead, when they were far enough from the gym, he made some conversation with her. I'm glad things have been going so well since you moved in with us, Himiko. I can't believe how fast the adoption papers went through. It had been 2 months since Himiko moved in and things were still a bit awkward for the three of them, but Himiko did eventually settle in like how he expected. His mom did confide with him in private about how weird it was to have Himiko living with them at first, but she quickly took the girl in as one of her own before he knew it. Yeah, and thanks for not making me go back to school. Himiko thanked him, but her focus remained on her phone. Still, homeschool is so boring. I'm glad you're tutoring me. No problem, most of the stuff you're learning is stuff I already studied for. Right, for the UA exam? Himiko huffed, rolling her eyes, her irritation subtle but clear. It was clear that she wasn't a fan of heroes, not by a long shot, but living with Izuku and seeing how determined he was and how hard he worked to achieve his dream was slowly wearing down his distaste. That didn't mean she understood it though. I still don't get why you want to be a hero so bad, she muttered, keeping her eyes on her phone. Izuku glanced at her, the usual smile on his faltering a bit. He didn't want to push her, knowing that Himiko had a rough past with heroes. She'd opened up to him bit by bit, but her views on the hero society remained a touchy subject. It's something I've always wanted, he replied, not wanting to push the topic too much. And now that I've got my quirk, it feels like I actually can. One step at a time. Himiko's eyes flicked up from her phone to him for a moment, her lips pressing into a thin line. If only he knew that he didn't need a quirk to save her. Heroes had never done anything for her, they didn't save her when she needed it. But Izuku was different. He wasn't just another hero wannabe, he actually cared, and that was what scared her the most. As they walked through the quiet streets on their way home, Himiko kept sneaking glances at Izuku, thinking about what Mina said in the gym. You better be here next time too. I can't be the only one suffering from these two nerds. That moment had caught her off guard, people didn't usually want her around. Mina's casual invitation had stirred something in her that she hadn't felt in a while, but it felt very different than the last time she felt it. She didn't hate the gym even if she pretended that it didn't matter to her. Watching Izuku push his limits, with Kirishima cheering him on, and Mina's easygoing presence reminded her of her early middle school years. But unlike then where she felt out of place, here was different. It made her feel like she belonged. What did any of this mean for her future? Izuku was going to UA and so were Kirishima and Mina. UA is one of the most prestigious hero schools and she wasn't sure where she was going. It didn't make it better that Izuku would be moving into UA in the second week. You don't have to come with me to UA, you know, Izuku said suddenly, breaking the silence between them as if sensing her thoughts. His voice was soft as if he didn't want her to feel pressured. Himiko blinked, surprised by his comment. What makes you think I'd want to go? Izuku chuckled nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. I don't know. It's just, now that you live with me, I don't want you to feel like you have to follow me to UA. Becoming a hero is my dream. You can do whatever you want, Himiko, I'll support you to the max. Himiko felt his warm touch on her shoulder. When their eyes met, her strange smile lit up a bit. Himiko lingered outside their apartment complex, cleaning off her shoes before entering. The street was quiet, the sun dipping below the horizon as the early evening crowd thinned. Her eyes watched the shadows stretch across the ground, the faint hum of traffic and distant chatter in the air. Her mind was still swirling with questions about her future, about what Izuku had said. You don't have to come with me to UA, you know. Suddenly, the peaceful quiet was shattered by the roar of an engine. Tires screeched as a black car sped down the street, swerving through traffic. Himiko's sharp feline eyes caught a glimpse of a hero pursuing the vehicle. The sirens blared as the car shot past, weaving dangerously between pedestrians. She stepped forward instinctively, her eyes narrowing as the car sped through the intersection. It wasn't the chase that grabbed her attention but that a small child had wandered into the street with a ball, completely unaware of the upcoming danger. Himiko's heart skipped a beat. No. She couldn't call Izuku back out in time. Without thinking, she sprinted forward, her legs moving faster than her mind could process. In a split second, she reached the child just as the car came barreling toward them. With one powerful leap, she scooped the boy into her arms, rolling out of the car's path just in time. The car swerved and continued down the street, but it wasn't long before the heroes caught up, bringing the chase to an end. The child trembled in her arms, clinging to her as the world around them came back to focus. The screeching tires and the blaring sirens all faded into the background as the boy stared up at her with wide, grateful eyes. The boy's mother had also run up to them and held Himiko tightly, a mix of weeping and thanking her. Thank you, miss," the boy whispered, trembling with awe. Himiko blinked, her heart still racing. She hadn't even thought about what she was doing, her body moved on its own. But now she held the boy tightly, his mother holding both of them too as they cried. I saved him. The scene had drawn the attention of a few bystanders, forming a crowd around them. Cheers and clapping filled the street, and Himiko froze, completely taken aback by the response. People were calling her a hero, congratulating her for her bravery. Out of all the voices in the crowd, one stood out from the rest and Himiko knew where to find it. She looked up and saw Izuku running towards her, his face lit up with relief and excitement. "Himiko!" he cried out, pushing through the onlookers. He stumbled to his knees harshly, and enveloped her in a hug, his arms around her waist. "That was amazing." He pulled back enough to look her in the eyes. "You saved him. I'm sorry I couldn't help you." Himiko stared at him, still processing everything that had just happened. The cheers, the praise, Izuku's warm embrace, everything felt surreal. It felt strange. She wasn't used to attention, at least. Not this kind of attention, to be seen as a hero. But looking around at the smiling faces, the grateful boy and mother at her side, and Izuku's proud grin, something inside her shifted gradually. Is this what it's like, Izuku? Is this feeling what drives you to become the best for the sake of others? "She's a hero," one of the bystanders shouted. "And, no, I'm not." She started to speak, but the crowd didn't let her finish. They continued cheering, calling her brave, courageous, a hero. She couldn't help but chuckle when the crowd cursed the so-called hero for almost letting it happen. She could feel the warmth of Izuku as his arms stayed wrapped around her, his genuine laughter mixed with tears radiating through his smile. "Maybe, just maybe, I can be more than I ever thought possible." Izuku pulled back, his hands now resting on her shoulders as he met her gaze. "You are a hero, Himiko," he said quietly, wiping away the tears that had escaped her eyes. "You might not want to believe it, but everyone saw what you just did." Himiko's cheeks flushed, her usual confidence faltering for a moment as she absorbed his words. She glanced back down at the boy who was now safe in her arms, now looking up at her in awe. "Maybe," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the noise. "Will you help me?" She grabbed Izuku's hand. Izuku smiled, his grip on her hand and shoulder only tightening with encouragement. "Of course, let's do this together." As the police came to detain the criminals, the pro-heroes who had been in pursuit came to check on the boy and Himiko. For her, even if the crowd had dispersed, the feeling of that moment still lingered for her. Himiko looked around, her mind racing with possibilities. For the first time, she wasn't just the outcast or the dangerous girl with a dark past. She was someone who had saved a life, someone who was being called a hero. And maybe, just maybe, she wanted to feel that again. But before any of that, she needed a change of clothes. "Izu, your tears are getting my shirt wet. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. I hope you found it as intriguing and thought-provoking as we did." A big shout-out to Unanimousuki for crafting such a compelling story. Don't forget to check out their profile on Archive of Our Own for more amazing works. The link is in the description below. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to What If Deku 2.0 for more fascinating explorations into the world of fanfiction and fantasy. Your support helps us create more content like this, and we're always excited to hear your thoughts and suggestions in the comments section. See you guys in the next video.